Thank you. And good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see you this afternoon, this evening now. This work session of the Board of Trustees of Spring Independent School District is officially called to order on Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. The time is now 6:06 p.m. Board trustees present are Winfred Adams Jr., Deborah Jensen, Justine Durant, Jana Gonzalez, Dawn Davis, and myself, Rhonda Newhouse. I would like to ask everyone to turn off or silence your cell phones or electronic devices at this time, please. Thank you. The next order of business for tonight is a review of the minutes from previous meeting. Does any trustee have any changes or corrections to the minutes of the September 5th, 2019 board work session or the September 10th, 2019 regular meeting? Hearing none, these items will be submitted as a part of the consent agenda on the October 8th, 2019 Board of Trustees regular meeting. I'd like to take a moment and recognize Chris Bell, who's joined us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Let us now hear from our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Rodney Watson.
Thank you, President Newhouse and other trustees and everyone in the audience. Good evening. I just have a few announcements for tonight. We're really excited about our agenda that we have planned tonight. First of all, we're going to have 3 presentations. One, as you know, we've been selected as a district participating in a leadership opportunity with the Holsworth Foundation, and so we will hear from the Holsworth Center. In addition to that, our campuses have been working hard on their targeted improvement plans, and so several of our campuses are here to present their targeted improvement plans for your approval for tonight. In addition to that, we do have a one-time expenditure conversation that we want to talk with you all about as well. And so we're really excited about that. We know that we have several things that are on our agenda tonight, and so I want to suspend the rest of my comments for our regular meeting on Tuesday so we can go ahead and start on our agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next item is agenda participation. It is new to our meeting and has been implemented in compliance to Section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code. This item allows members of the public an opportunity to speak on agenda items before these items are considered by the board. The board is happy to comply with this because we think it's very important that we hear from our community before continuing with the agenda. So, Ms. Hill, do we have any registered to speak under the agenda participation?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Thank you. And please know that at any time, our community is welcome to come before us and speak on agenda items only at this point in our meeting. For our next item, I would like to recognize Trustee and Board Governance Committee Lead, Justine Durant.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to bring forth tonight, we've been working on our Lone Star governance, and we recognize as a board that it's really imperative for us to be successful, that we operate smoothly within guidelines and efficiently, because change starts at the top and the example is set at the top. So we've been very involved with Lone Star governance. And tonight we have an overview that I'm actually going to turn over to Trustee Adams, who's been leading that for the committee.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Watson and President Newhouse and I met with Robbie McGowan from Region 4 yesterday and discussed our development of our framework. And so Dr. Watson and his team have been busily working through designing a framework for spring. And we were charged in the governance committee with developing what are called board constraints. So Dr. Watson has developed, in partnership with us, his own superintendent constraints. Board constraints are the things that we have decided we will be constrained from doing. In committee, we developed 5 of those, and we wanted to share those with you and get feedback and input from you all. So if you go to your folder that says Board Governance, I believe it's on the 3rd page, in mine it is. It says Board's Constraints for the Board. I'll go ahead and read those to you. In attaining the board's student outcome goals, the Spring Independent School District shall not, and constraints are things that we are constrained from doing, make modifications to, additions to, or subtractions from board policy AE local, board goals, or superintendent goals more than once per year. That's constraint number 1. Constraint 2 is collectively or individually perform or appear to perform any of the roles delegated to the superintendent. Number 3 is collectively or individually violate board policy. Number 4 is communicate the substance of any discussion held in closed session or any information learned only as the result of discussion in closed session to any person who would not have been authorized to attend the closed session in which the discussion occurred. And finally, trustees shall direct all staff, parent, and/or stakeholder grievances to the appropriate grievance policy. Those are the 5 that we developed in governance committee. And so I open the floor to anybody else's questions or concerns or comments or additions to those.
If I may add, the framework recommends 3, but we can have as many as we like.
Right.
But as a committee, we brought 5 to the body for a discussion and a decision. If you all have one that we don't have here, we're open to that as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll give you a minute to digest it.
I must say to the governance committee, in meeting with Mr. McGowan yesterday, he is very impressed with what our district has been doing following the state's requirements for Lone Star governance. And our framework that we are using, he wants to share with other districts. But before we could give him permission, we wanted to make sure that our board was okay with it, that you were satisfied with what we have here, what you've done, and everyone is pleased with it. So hats off to the governance committee for working hard on these constraints and coming up with them. I did get a chance to look at them. I was very pleased with them, and I don't have any additions or subtractions from what you have. Others may have something. Thank you.
Does it bother you that some of these constraints are already in board policy, the local policy? Is it all right to duplicate the constraints?
I don't foresee that to be a barrier. From the constraints are things that we recognize in which to govern ourselves by. So whether it comes from policy, I don't think that.
Tradition, best practices.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I can confirm that, Dr. Jensen, but I think we're good.
I was looking at the last bullet about trustees shall direct all staff, parent, and or stakeholder grievances to the appropriate grievance policy. Certainly agree with that. But on page 32, some of the board authority policy we're reviewing tonight has a section on referring complaints. And so if you think it's okay to have it both places,
Yes.
it's fine.
Yeah, we shouldn't have a constraint that conflicts with board policy.
No, no.
But definitely if we want to highlight one that we feel passionate about, I think this is appropriate.
And also to your point, Dr. Jensen, like the recommendation for the framework as we score ourselves is 3. It's from 1 to 5 is when you start scoring. 3 is considered optimal, but if we as a collective decide that we don't really need 1 or 2 of these because it is already in board policy, we can certainly leave that out. And this is a living document. This is something that we can discuss and amend as we see fit.
So Winfred, do we lose points by having the additional ones?
I'd have to go back and look at the rubric. I don't think so. When we were with Dr. McGowan, we went through some of these, and he illustrated how some of what we were doing was scoring us so many points in the framework, and if we made small adjustments, we would move up.
Get more points.
Yeah. So
Amazing amount of work here. Kudos to you all
Too often.
to pull this together so quickly.
I have to give all the credit to Dr. Watson. I think as a committee, though, we were charged by Dr. Watson after he'd already developed this constraints that he thought
Yes.
that we needed to do that as well. So
Some of this has been going on for almost a year. I
Right.
think, yeah.
I agree. I think this is great work by the governance committee. I know you mentioned there's sometimes 1 to 3, and having 5 I don't think is out of the ordinary. They're very concise constraints. They're not too broad. I think these are really good, and it definitely ties into our duties as the school board. So I agree with Dr. Jensen. You guys did some great work, and appreciate everything you did put into this document. It looks great.
thank you. So
Any other comments or feedback?
we have some time to look this over, and I know I'm as a slow processor, I need time to think about it for a couple of weeks, and so we can come back to this. I think we were talking about meeting with Dr. McGowan in November, so we have time to really iron this out and refine it.
So one of the things I wanted to do, because it's a lot of work in here, and this is a recommendation from the committee to the body as a whole. So had asked that we perhaps have a committee of the whole meeting, a COW meeting, where we can actually take some time, focus on it, and make sure that everybody has their input. I'd asked the board president if she could schedule that on a timeline, but if you're meeting again in November, that may change the timeline we talked about.
Actually, it doesn't. You took the words right out of my
Oh,
mouth.
okay.
We had already talked about it, and we're going to be asking you to look at your calendar
Perfect.
to give us a date. And from that date, we will set the meeting with Robbie after we have come together to meet.
All right.
So we're going to be asking you to look at your calendar, give us at least maybe 2 to 3 days and dates, and from there, combine them and see which is best for all of us. Select a date, and from there, we'll notify Rob.
Okay. So other than the 8 of us, who else would participate in that?
It's up to y'all. But one of the things that he wanted to do at that meeting was to do the team of 8 evaluation, self-evaluation. I think Dr. Jensen had mentioned, and so we would do that during that time. And so we could probably plan that to be more of our team building and then do that exercise. And then normally what we've done on the Saturday is we could bring the entire cabinet in, and we can actually go through some of the goals and have the conversation so we can all participate in where we are on these particular items.
Okay. So that would help us iron out our framework as well as meet our team building requirement all in one shot. So I like that. I'd like to get it done before year end,
That's the goal.
if everyone's okay with that. So perhaps since it's the whole cabinet, maybe if you all can propose maybe 4 dates, and then the board will respond our availability. To me, that may be more efficient.
Okay, so we'll
Easier.
get with Jason and he'll send out
Jason's-
dates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we want to try to do it before the election or after the election? Or is that-
I don't know, Chris.
I don't think we should let the election
Yeah.
impact what we do or don't do. We need to keep it going. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I think I
This is a requirement for us, so either way, we need to complete it. We need to do our self-evaluation, and then we need to come up with our governance
it,
framework.
it gives better feedback if it's prior to, but
I guess
to
So
Trustee
let's
Bell's
let
point.
him look at the calendar
Okay.
and come up with some times for us
That's how we're doing it.
and send that out to us, Jason. In your packet, I appreciate our checklist too, that we need to go over and make sure that we are doing these things as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention the checklist.
Go
I
ahead.
also want to, there's a checklist, so if you can look through that checklist and it can correlate with what we have in the actual packet, so.
Dr. McGowan
I want to
mentioned,
recognize the whole committee, though, and that is Trustee Adams and Dr. Deborah Jensen and myself, our governance committee. So we've been working hard. We've even gone to biweekly meetings now, so.
Good job. Excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those that are out in the audience, we don't mean to exclude you from our conversation here. So to share with you a little bit, we are required to come up with our Lone Star Governance Framework Plan that we need to share. And in doing so, the focus that we want to focus on is the amount of time that we spend on student achievement in our school board meetings. We want to do those things that will focus on improving our student academic achievement throughout the year. So as a result of doing that, to kind of evaluate ourselves, we've taken time to look at the amount of time that we spend in our meetings. So before we continue to move on to the next item, I'd like to update you on the amount of time that we have spent relating to academic achievement versus operational items of the district. So to the board, for the month of June, our meeting was 3 hours and 14 minutes. Time spent on academic discussions was 1 hour, 12 minutes. Time on operational topic discussions, 2 hours, 2 minutes. At our June 11th meeting, we spent 3 hours and 35 minutes in the meeting. We only spent 6 minutes in academic topic discussion. The other 3 hours, 29 minutes was on operational topic discussions. August 8th, our meeting was 1 hour, 32 minutes. At that meeting, only 26 minutes were spent on academic topic discussions. Operational topics, 2 hours and 17 minutes. In our September 5th meeting, our meeting was 2 hours, 16 minutes. We spent 1 hour, 41 minutes on student academic topics and discussions. On operational discussions, we only spent 35 minutes. In our September 10th meeting, we spent 1 hour, 53 minutes in a meeting, and only 2 minutes did we discuss academic topics, discussions that affect student achievement. We spent 1 hour, 51 minutes in operational topics and discussions. So I wanted you to know we are keeping a record, and it's up to us to make sure that we put more emphasis on student academic achievement. And I know tonight we're going to hear from our campus improvement plans from certain schools, and we're all very interested in their presentation and how it's going to affect our student achievement. But we want our audience to know and our community to know that the board does want to focus more on student academic achievement in our meetings. So you will see us asking for presentations from our schools and from our departments and committees on those items that we feel is very important to the improvement of academic achievement for our students. So it's not that we are not interested and whether Mark is going to get that new stadium up and running for us quickly. We would like that to happen too, but we do want to focus more on our student academic achievement. So, please.
You know, and I feel honored to be able to chair the governance committee and put the focus on what's important. I know that my colleagues that I serve with, at the heart of all of us, we care about our students and their success. And developing a framework to make sure that the time we spend together as a body is focused on what's needed and what's best for our students, to me is imperative, and it's just the beginning of making a change and seeing a difference. So I'm really excited. These numbers, some of them are good and some of them are disappointing, but it makes us aware, and to me, awareness is the first step towards making a difference and making a change. So now that we're aware, when we get in our committee of the whole meeting, we can have a conversation on how we can better focus on improving student achievement in the time that we come together as a team.
I would just point out that sometimes it is wholly appropriate to talk about operations. When
Yeah.
we're in budget discussions, like, there really isn't any space for that. So sometimes those meetings will appear that way, and that's for good purpose. So
The only other thing I wanted to say is,
Which explains June.
as the team of 8 and we continue to grow, don't beat up on yourself too much, because when you look at some of the areas where we said we spent 2 minutes, those are the board meeting nights, and because we have lengthy work sessions, the academics are on consent agenda, and so you all approve all of them at once, and you spend all the time the night on the Thursday before doing that. So
Exactly.
when you're looking at the numbers, remember, when you see 1 hour and 2 hours on academics and 0 on the next, it's because it's a consent agenda.
And to Winfred's point, in June, we're doing budget, so that's why all the time is there. I'll bring that back later. It'd be nice to track the work sessions as well. But we'll talk about that as
We
a-
do. This is work sessions
This is
as
both.
well. This is
Okay,
both.
all right. Thank you.
This is both.
That's all I have for my committee.
actually, we do have, one other item that we've been discussing, we're in the midst of working through update 113 from TASB. And so I have a particular issue with one of our policies in update 113. That's policy FNF local, and there is language in it that I want to bring to the board for further discussion. And I will read to you the passage that concerns me. It's in FNF local, which is on student rights and responsibilities, investigations, and searches. Subheading, questioning students. District officials may question a student regarding the student's own conduct or the conduct of other students in the context of school discipline. Students may not refuse to answer questions based on a right not to incriminate themselves. So I've been going back and forth with legal counsel. There isn't really any case law on point with regard to this issue. There's several Bill of Rights cases that sort of circle around this with regard to students' First Amendment rights and Fourth Amendment rights. And so I don't like that language, but that's just my personal code, and that is related to issues with school to prison pipeline, equity, and the position sometimes our students are in, and the position sometimes our administrators are in, as it relates to self-incrimination. So I just want to have a discussion about that language and whether we want to excise or replace or amend that language. That language is very common in Texas and TASB local policy. It's been there since 1999. But again, there is no case law. It is not, the language is not mentioned in FNF legal. And so, I'm open to hear what people have to say about that issue.
And may I comment, do we have a copy of it for the board? Can we get a copy? Would y'all like a copy?
I have mine. I can pass it around.
Okay, and it was a recommendation for that policy from TASB, and the governance committee made a decision to bring it to the whole board and make a decision as a board. So thank you for that reminder, Winfred. I don't know.
I
back.
think
Yeah,
we
I'm
can-
fine if people need.
I'd like to make a motion that we table it
the
till later on in
weekend.
the
Yeah,
agenda.
I'm fine with that. I mean, people, that we just sprung that on you, and so people will need time to
Okay.
digest it.
So,
Jason is going to make Jeremy is going to make copies of it, so we,
I have a motion
Oh,
to table till
have
later in the
one.
agenda. I didn't hear a second though.
It wasn't an agenda item,
It-
so,
yeah, so
which
it's
is
just
part of
under
my,
your
our
committee,
board
so
governance report.
we don't need a motion, we can just table it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Bring it up at our next discussion. Thank you, Wimpert.
You're welcome.
Anything else on the Lone Star Governance Framework? Okay, we have our homework to review and look at our constraints, and we will get our dates from Jason, in which we will meet and continue to review this. So again,
I should
thank
say, I
you.
would also really love to hear Chief's opinion on this issue too, if he has one. You get a chance to review the policy.
Once I have an opportunity to review it, I will comment as necessary.
Thank you. Okay, so we will continue to move on. I'd like to recognize our Chief of Staff, Dr. Julie Hill.
Madam President, Dr. Watson, trustees, thank you very much once again for the opportunity to give you some academic information. And I'm sure, as you recall, trustees and members of the audience, that we had the honor to become a part of the second cohort of the prestigious Holdsworth Center. And of course, you've been hearing our whisperings about our Holdsworth Center and all of the work and our homework and different opportunities we've had for professional development. But at the very same time, we want to make sure that you are fully aware of what it is that we're committing ourselves to do. In the very same way that you are working through the Lone Star governance model to improve your work as trustees, we as the leadership here in Spring ISD and the entire district are working to become better leaders for our students and for our parents and community. And so the Holdsworth Center is the vehicle through which we've devoted our time to do so. It's a hefty investment, and we want to make sure that you know more about what we're doing. So tonight, I'd like to invite two of our new family members, because they actually live here with us in the district, to come forward at this time and have them introduce themselves, and they have a presentation for you on the Holdsworth Center so you can learn more about what we do.
Good evening, President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, members of the board. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. We're excited to share a little bit about the partnership that we have with Spring and help you understand some of the work that's already kicked off. My name is Katie Jaron. I work across all 6 of the districts in our new cohort. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Shanti, who does live here in Spring ISD. And we are 2 of 4 staff members who are supporting Spring ISD throughout the duration of the partnership. And our mission at the Holdsworth Center is to impact over time the quality of K-12 public education for all Texas students by supporting and developing educational leaders. And so what we do is really the last part of that sentence, supporting and developing educational leaders with a particular emphasis on the principal pipeline, since the research tells us that after having an excellent teacher in every classroom, the next most important thing is to have an excellent principal in every school to impact student achievement. And the inspiration for that mission comes from our founder, Charles Butt, who is a big believer in public education and also a big believer that there are no shortcuts and no silver bullets when we're trying to make sustainable change. And so we feel very lucky to have this inspiration for our mission. And we often get asked, why are you called Holdsworth Center? Where does that come from? We're named after Charles's mother, Mary Elizabeth Holdsworth Butt, who was a teacher in the Texas Hill Country. So she is in this photograph in the top row, 3rd from the right, and this is her with her class. And so we feel very lucky also to be grounded in the legacy that she had. Charles always credits his mother as the person who really instilled in him a deep desire to be of service and to make life better for all Texans. So a couple of things about our approach that I want to share with you tonight. One is we really take a long-term view of change. So the partnership that we commit to with all of our partner districts is a 5-year partnership because we believe that some of the most difficult changes that we have to make take time. And when you're developing leaders and you're investing in people and building capacity, that is not work that can happen overnight. So we take a long-term view. We also believe that leadership isn't about superheroes. It isn't about having one really strong leader at the top. It's about building teams and systems of leaders so that you have leadership at every level of your organization. We also don't see our role as to replace the district role in developing leadership. We're here to add capacity. Hopefully Spring ISD will be able to bring systems, to build systems and structures for leadership development that really are durable and stand the test of time. And then we really believe in a partnership approach because we don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all solution for school districts. It really matters to us to deeply understand the context of every district that we're working with, the vision, the strengths, the challenges, the opportunities, and put together solutions in partnership with the leadership in each district. So this also tells a lot about our approach. So we use this pyramid to basically communicate our theory of change. So if you look on the left side of this pyramid, we start at the bottom, and the idea is that you start by building stronger individual leaders, so investing in specific individuals. And we do that through our district leaders program and then the campus leaders program. So we'll work with many Spring campuses over the next 5 years. So you build stronger leaders so that they in turn build stronger systems and stronger organizations that over time produce stronger results for students. And that clearly is the North Star for everyone in this room. So a bit about our approach to building stronger leaders. We have a curriculum for our district leaders program and our campus leaders program that is grounded in these 3 themes that you see here. So we start with developing our own personal leadership. Then we build skill in growing and empowering others. So that includes, how do I work with a team? How do I coach people? How do I distribute leadership and really build the leaders around me? And then how do I apply all of those skills to create change in my organization? So that's how we think about building stronger leaders. The systems that we focus on, there are many systems in a school district. We think about a pipeline of ready leaders, and an easy way to understand that is just the bench strength. What's the strength of the leadership bench in the district? And then an engaged culture, a staff culture where every employee feels very connected to and inspired by the mission of the organization. And again, of course, all in service of excellent and equitable results for students. So this is a brief overview of the 5 years and how all the different pieces come together. So Shanti and I will talk through each of the different components of this throughout the presentation, but we're in year 1. I think we're in year 4, or month 4 of a 5-year partnership, so we're still getting started. So in year 1, the 2 components of the partnership that come online are the district leaders program, so that's for superintendents and their senior teams, and then district support, which is what Shanti and our other embedded staff do in the district. So we'll talk about each of these pieces as we go. So as Julie Hill mentioned, we started 2 years ago with our first cohort of districts in 2017. So we are very excited to welcome Spring to the next cohort. And Spring will be among the first group of leaders to actually visit the Holdsworth Center, the physical Holdsworth Center, which doesn't exist now, but will exist in fall 2020. So we're very excited about that. So the leadership development sessions that we host now all around the state will be hosted at our center in Austin in the future. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more specifically about what's happening in Spring so far in the partnership. So as I shared, there's 2 components of this partnership that have kicked off already, the district leaders program, district support, and then coaching. So the district leaders program is a 2-year executive leadership development program for superintendents and their teams. And we've been spending a lot of our time so far studying organizations in Texas, across the world, in education, outside of education, that are best in class at developing people and are best in class at talent management. And so we went to Singapore this summer, the country that is always at the top of the PISA rankings, and one of the primary contributors to that is the strength of their leadership development for all of their people and their principals. Just last month, we were studying how HEB approaches leadership development. Turns out there's a lot that schools can learn from grocery stores. And then this month, we are going to Canada to study what's been happening in Ontario, where there's been really a decade of progress and increased student achievement. And again, a leadership development strategy has been at the core of that. So we think there's a lot of value in, before you start building systems and changing things, seeing a lot of different examples and getting inspiration from a lot of different places to figure out, again, there isn't a one-size-fits-all model of how this works, so that leaders in Spring can start to think through, what do we see in various places that we can study that might improve leadership development here? Coaching is also another big part of the District Leaders Program. So we offer an executive coach for the first year of the program to all of our superintendents and district champions. All of our district leader participants also receive a 360 review so that they can use that to target their own personal growth and development, and they'll have a chance to participate in peer coaching over time. We also offer executive coaching to all of the principals who participate in the Campus Leaders Program. So that first cohort of the Campus Leadership Program will begin next summer, this coming summer, 2020. And over time, we aim to work with about 50% of the campuses in each of our partner districts. And so in spring, that means we'll probably have about 4 to 5 campuses in each of these different cohorts. So we sort of stagger them across the duration of the partnership. The Campus Leadership Program is a program for teams, much like the District Leadership Program. So it doesn't just include the principal, it includes the principal and maybe an AP. We encourage inclusion of a teacher leader on these teams so that they can come together and build their skills together as a team. The Campus Leadership Program, the curriculum really mirrors those 3 themes that we looked at earlier. So develop personal leadership, grow and empower others, and create change. In the campus program, each campus defines a particular problem of practice related to student achievement so that as they build these leadership skills, they focus the leadership skills towards solving a particular challenge of student achievement. So we'll look forward to meeting some of the spring principals and campus teams. And then the other element that's already in motion is the district support team. So a unique aspect of the Holdsworth Partnership is we provide embedded support staff. Shanti has an office right down the hall. She's here all the time. And we do that because we want to provide extra capacity to the district as they work toward creating change and building systems. So I'm going to have Shanti speak a little bit more about the work that she's been doing.
Thank you. So like Katie mentioned, we have a home here in Spring, a lovely home just down the hall. And so I'm here in the district a few days every week and get to work alongside and just be in the middle of the work as we build these systems. And we're really building systems towards what we call affectionately our Holdsworth House. So this is our framework for talent development, and I'll spend a little bit of time walking through the different elements. But the thing that our district support team works with districts on is to create their own version of this talent development house in this framework. So at the top of the house, our outcomes, the roof, again, very similar to the pyramid that you saw, are excellent and equitable outcomes for students. So something that we are all here for and working towards. Also that pipeline of ready leaders, so that bench and what it looks like and whether people are prepared and ready to step into those leadership roles, and staff engagement, so how invested staff across the district are in the overall mission and vision of the district and how they feel that their individual work impacts that and brings Spring ISD towards its overall goals. Below that lies the pillars, so this really is the heart of the work that district support does with our districts. And this really is focused in on that principal pipeline. So the way that future principals are identified and tracked, the development opportunities given, so professional learning, coaching, feedback, all of those things as we grow principals. PLACE really talks about selection processes and the match, so how are candidates selected and matched to certain campuses. And then the support of principals once they are in that role, so that professional development, coaching, feedback that they get as sitting principals. Below that, we have our enablers, and so these are things that affect how those pillars show up. So with roles, we're really focused on role clarity and what that pathway looks like for anybody who's interested in taking a leadership role. Data focuses really on human capital information and what's being collected and assessed as we track leaders in the system. Evaluation, we feel like, is a tool that really operates as a lever for growth and development. Incentives refers to rewards and compensation that exist that kind of keep people happy, keep people in the district, and incentivizes them to take on additional roles and leadership opportunities. Communication then focuses on internal communication and how folks throughout the district are kept current with district initiatives, updates, things like that. Below that, we have our leadership definition, which is a foundational piece I'll talk about in a minute. And at the bottom of our house, again, the foundation is that district culture. So there we're really referring to organizational culture and just this general idea of how things get done here in the district. And as we build this house, obviously, the strong foundation helps build a strong house. And so that's part of the work that we're doing here. So we have two major initiatives in year one that we're focused on. I'll speak to each of these, but the first is conducting a talent assessment and then also creating that leadership definition. So a talent assessment is a key structure of our approach in our partnership with all of our districts in the cohort, and something that we will do every year with each of our districts. And so really we are gathering data and input on every element of that house that we just looked at, and sharing it back with the leadership team of just here's where talent development lives in its current structure right now in the district, and it can help guide a vision for the future and also help us identify what work we want to prioritize and support with the district. And we are collecting data from a variety of sources. So we had a survey that went out just last week. We got over 2,500 responses, which was great, that just collects broad input. In addition to that, we kind of go a layer down and get some additional feedback and input from central office interviews, so interviews with central office leaders, as well as focus groups with teachers, principals, APs, and teacher leaders. And we're also coming through a variety of data, documents, and archives as we gather this report. This report will be shared with the leadership team next month. And then the leadership definition, again, is another big piece that we are excited about embarking very soon here in spring. And what we mean by this is just a broad definition that lists values and behaviors and shares expectations of what it is to be a leader here in spring, and then that applies to everybody, not just the principals or APs, but everyone in the system, and offers something that they can strive towards. It's aspirational and also applicable to everyone in their role, and helps build that fulfillment of I'm doing this, whatever role I have, I'm doing this work and working towards this leadership definition. And the reason we do this is we feel like it's a linchpin for this talent development system, and really can affect the way that our pillars are built, that our enablers work together, and creates alignment throughout the system, so that once a leadership definition is created and shared across the system, future leaders, so aspiring leaders, understand how the leaders in the system are identified, are selected. They can drive their own development. There's a shared list of understanding behaviors at which they determine what they need to get additional support, feedback, and development in, and receive that targeted professional development, which addresses those high priority skills that it takes to be a successful leader here in spring. And then current leaders can also use this as they are working to identify the folks on their campus who could be that next generation of leaders. They themselves can receive tailored coaching and support within those behaviors to grow professionally. And also participate in professional learning that's linked system-wide, so that everybody is aligned in what those behaviors are, what we expect to see in leaders throughout the system. Okay, so here are some examples of leadership definitions that came out of our first cohort of districts. All look very different, but the language is we invite district stakeholders from all across the different levels of the organization to participate, gather input, and really determine what works and what makes sense for their own district. So they create the language, they create the visual, and then share it across the district, across the system. And so we will be taking a similar approach here in spring. So want to really engage a broad spectrum of stakeholders from all levels of the organization. And this will be a very iterative process. So we're going to have, generate some ideas, get some feedback, get some input, ensure that voices from throughout the organization are heard as we work to finalize this definition that is, offers clarity, is rigorous, and also builds investment from folks throughout the district. And so we are planning to arrive at that final leadership definition by the end of next semester. All right, so that is just high-level overview of the Holdsworth Center and our work here in spring, and just want to open it up to you all if you have any questions about Holdsworth, about the partnership in the district.
Thank you, guys. Just a couple of things. What are you all's collectively your skills and your backgrounds? Is it corporate, public ed, higher ed, a little bit of this and that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We intentionally try to build a team that comes with a variety of different backgrounds. So a lot of us, Shanti and myself, both educators, education background. We do have team members that come from a private background, and we find it valuable to just bring a whole lot of different perspectives and experiences on what leadership development can look like to the team.
And then my second question is, you guys have started with some more districts. I know you showed us some information. What have you guys learned with your other interactions with those districts that you might change or applying moving forward? So.
Yeah, it's a great question. We are constantly learning things. I would say one of the biggest learnings from the first cohort back to the house. I think one of the big lessons is, to build a house like this that really stands, the systems need to be coherent with each other, and I think that's one of the things that we see in these places that we go to visit. So, it's not so much the quality of every individual system, but it's how they all work together. And so to that end, one of the things we've learned is that it's really important to spend time putting together what we're calling a blueprint for the house before you start building and creating new systems and communicating them. And so that's one of the things that we've changed in the program, is allowing more time for the district teams to really process what they're seeing, start to put together their blueprint, so that when we start to build, all the systems are work together.
Didn't your founder, Charles Butt, just receive a very amazing award from TASB?
Did, yes. The Key Community
Okay.
Award, yes.
I thought I recognized the name when we saw that. I'm very interested in your iterative process on discovering the leadership qualities that we value here in Spring. Because I have certainly heard from different people myself. Are you coming up with any preliminary findings at this time?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of research that we'll share with the input committee and the steering committee. That's just comes from different organizations, university level, and we'll start there. Also want to bring in some of the core values and qualities that exist here in the district. And share some behaviors and just get different sets of input and feedback on that as we move towards that clear definition.
And that work is kicking off next month,
yeah.
I think. So, yeah.
I'm just asking because through my years in education, it seems like some leaders are very bold and dynamic and charismatic. But then I see some that are incredibly strong leaders who are very quiet and actually are always attributing their success to their team and that sort of thing. So I'm just interested in what you're going to come out with.
I think it's a great question and a great point, because if you look at the leadership frameworks that some of our districts have come up with, it's a set of leadership competencies. To be a great leader, you don't need to be at 100 on all of the leadership competencies. There are different combinations that can create different, sort of profiles of leadership. To your point, a leadership could be very outgoing and charismatic, or actually, very maybe behind the scenes and empowering the team. And there are different ways to be an effective leader. So I think we hope that, grounded in the research, the leadership framework will be comprehensive enough to account for all the different ways that leaders can be.
So it looks like from the talent assessment, you're going to do surveys, interview focus groups, and then look at data. Oh, that's a good way to do it. How do we determine, though? I don't know if this is a question for you or for the district. Who are we including in that assessment? Is it all campuses?
Yeah, so the survey went out to all full-time employees with the Spring ISD email address. So campus level as well as central office folks, different departments. And then the focus groups and interviews, focus groups are focused in on campus folks, so principals, teachers, APs. And then our interviews were at the central office, so like heads of departments here centrally.
So I noticed that your foundation is district culture here in this house. That's something that we have been working on now for several years. And you mentioned that this is a long-term commitment. Like there's no quick fixes. It's a 5-year commitment. So I wonder And you may not have enough time or data to answer this question, but I wonder how changes in district personnel impact your process. For example, the superintendent moves on to a different job, or someone in his cabinet moves on, and so it creates this gap. And so I wonder, we're working through our cultural change and have made a commitment to our staff here to stick with the Spring way. And so I want that has to persist beyond whether one of us or superintendent transitions away. So I wonder how this would be impacted by something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think part of the reason why we take a long-term approach is because it's really important to build, to your point, systems that last, and then don't sort of like change from one year to the next, so that staff can have a consistent experience and know what's expected of them and know how to develop. And so I think we focus on systems and structures, so that we can build things that are bigger than any one person,
Right.
or two people in a cabinet, but something that is hopefully reflective of the aspirations of the entire organization.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, also. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Assistant Superintendent of Research, Accountability, and Testing, Dr. Jennifer Cobb.
Good evening, President Newhouse, Board of Trustees, Dr. Watson. So I'm really here to introduce Don Oliver, who has done the legwork at the district level for the targeted improvement plans. You have in a packet that you received our campuses that were impacted by the targeted improvement plans and the reason why they would have to submit a targeted improvement plan. So I'm going to let Don do the presentation, and then I'll be here to support with any questions that you have afterward.
Good evening, President Newhouse, Superintendent Watson, members of the Superintendent's Cabinet, and trustees. This evening, I'd like to share with you the processes that we've partaken to put together our campus improvement targeted improvement plans for you. You received some of those on a jump drive over the weekend, and we'll be providing the rest of those to you this weekend. So I wanted to assure you that our key imperatives and our levers that we've been working with in the Effective Schools framework are tightly aligned. So we are working with 5 levers in the framework in relation to leadership, hiring practices, having a quality curriculum, and having data-driven instruction, and having a high-quality instruction. As it relates to accountability, there are 2 systems that work working together. So for state accountability, we're looking at domains, and there are 3 domains that are rated in state accountability. The domains are achievement, progress, and closing the gap. Likewise, in federal accountability, we're also looking at our state system, but we're looking very closely at domain 3. So in our federal system, we're looking at closing the gaps. In our state accountability system, the schools and the district are identified with letter grades, A through F. In the federal system, some campuses are labeled comprehensive, targeted, or additionally targeted. There is a possibility that a school is in one or both systems. For our state accountability, the targeted improvement plans were required for students who earned an overall F, an overall D, a D in a domain, so in domains 1, 2, or 3, achievement, progress, or closing the gaps. All of those types of letter grades then triggered intervention actions. And in many cases, those actions are similar or identical across the various types of ratings. There were some, TEA did make some revisions to the process about 3 weeks into our work and pulled back on some of the requirements for school districts and schools. When we look at our federal accountability system, the label listed above, comprehensive, targeted, or additional targeted, triggers interventions, and they overlap and they marry very well. So schools who may be in turnaround for state accountability but might not be for federal accountability, they're working in the very same processes that their colleagues are working in if they're rated federally. So the systems marry very well together. The processes are aligned. And in most cases where TEA pulled back on their requirements, it was for those schools who are rated only in the federal system or had a label in the federal system, and that was 6 of our campuses. We talked last month about our timeline and how this process rolled out. What's important to know is that the state releases our ratings in mid-August. TEA set up a series of trainings through our regional service center at Region 4. And in the week of the 20th of August, Dr. Hill, Dr. Cobb, and I attended the 2-day ESF framework training. The following week, we brought together the principals of the schools who are required to go through the targeted improvement plan process and submit their plans to TEA. Those are the plans that you received over the weekend. So those 7 schools, their assistant superintendents, and several members of the Theory of Action Committee then joined us at Region 4 to repeat that session that we had attended the week before. During the week of the 4th of September, our campuses started inviting their communities and their family members up to the school to learn about the accountability ratings for their campus, and also a public forum to solicit input for the development of their targeted improvement plans. So there was a requirement to hold 2 public forums, one to announce the ratings for the school, and secondly, one to get input from the community as the TIP or targeted improvement plan is being developed. On Saturday, the 7th, we brought up the campuses that were turning in a tip to the state. Those are the 7 campuses that you reviewed this weekend. Those campuses and their leadership teams and members of central office work together then to work through the series of steps that it takes to develop a tip. So in those steps, we looked at data, longitudinal and by teacher, and we looked at our calculations for the different domains. And then we moved into identifying artifacts that we could either observe or that we've collected to evaluate ourselves on the levers that are part of the framework. And so each of the schools worked in that process during that meeting in September, and various members of central office joined a table and worked with them that half day that we were together. On the 9th, that Monday, we brought up the other 20 schools that weren't required to attend TEA training through the Region 4 Service Center. We brought them together and talked to them about the framework, shared with them the processes and the materials, and allowed them to start this work with their teams. The week of the 25th, the 7 schools presented to the superintendent, the Theory of Action Committee, to me, and to a few other members of central office, their plans for the TIP, and we asked them to walk through each of the steps in this process, to share with us their longitudinal data, to walk us through the processes of assessing their campus, and then the development of their TIP and what their focus areas would be for the coming year. On the 27th, we submitted to TEA our 7 plans. I will be working closely with a representative from TEA to get feedback from the state, and working with the campuses then to consider other options that TEA may want us to think about. This past few days, from the 1st to the 3rd, we reviewed the other 20 plans, the same committee, superintendent, Theory of Action, myself, and a few other members of central office. We reviewed the plans and provided written feedback to each principal, and they'll be submitting those 20 plans to us tomorrow afternoon. public hearing and the approval of the tips is what we're engaging in the next couple of days. And then I wanted to assure you that the tip process does require quarterly reports of the progress for each of the cycles near the end of November and in February and in June. So those dates have already been calendared. Our schools are aware of them, and we've showed them then how to report that data back. Of course, they're going to be monitoring in between these windows, but these are the official scheduled quarterly reports that are returned. I'm going to invite one of our campus principals up in just a moment to share with you some of her reflections about this process and what she's learned from it. But before I do that, are there any questions for me?
Well, I noticed you're a very important person on all these reports, that you're one of the 3 key people that apparently is overseeing this process.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just had a question for you about how you're finding working with the principals and Dr. Perez in our school district.
Yes, thank you. So the process of reviewing the tips with a committee has been very enlightening. This is my 2nd year in the district, so I didn't have the opportunity to work closely with our principals last year. So I'm learning a lot about the culture of their schools, where their challenges are, and where we can offer the most support to our schools. So it's been professionally a very good process for me to get to know them. And I think that we're finding that even though some of our schools weren't required to participate in this process, those schools that achieved an A, B, or a C, that many of the principals engaged in the process are sharing with their colleagues, this really is something that's a benefit, and I'll do it next year even if I'm not in the targeted improvement status. So the process has been very enlightening, and I think our schools are getting a lot of information that they didn't think about, or they're thinking about it differently. Thank you.
This might be kind of an impolitic question. So I was at a leadership conference earlier this week where there were a bunch of Harris County area superintendents. And one of them observed that when our schools are struggling, one of the things that we do is sort of saddle them with onerous compliance pieces from the federal and state level, so that schools that really need to focus more on students in the classroom are filling out lots of forms and paperwork and doing this compliance piece. And so I wanted to know how much time our principals are spending doing this stuff instead of...
Yes, sir. So I'll just give you the general frame of what we've done over the last few days, and then I'll invite either Dr. Watson or Dr. Cobb or one of our principals to share with you the actual time commitment during the day. So when we brought our principals together those 2 days at Region 4, much of the work was initiated at that time with their colleagues and with the central office folks. They were encouraged to go back to their campuses and share with their leadership teams the process, and then ask them to start collecting this evidence. So I'll ask, if it's okay with you, for one of our principals to share that amount of time that they spent engaging in the process. It seems from what I've heard from our schools to this point that much of what they were asked to collect as artifacts were things that they put in place over the summer, and they could easily collect their sign-in sheets or their agendas or their plans. So there was a couple of days where they were in the school observing the processes or the classroom routines that were put in place. But I think that it overlaps very well with what their day-to-day work would have been anyway.
Yep.
As it relates to completing the templates, I won't speak for the campuses personally, but I would think that it would probably have been several hours per week, but not something that they were working on during the day. That's the impression that I have, is many were staying after school, they were getting together on Saturdays, or they were working in the morning before school. So I'll let Principal Brown share that with you when she comes up in just a moment, and then ask if Theory of Action or anyone else, superintendent, has any other.
So I did ask that question. I was actually looking at their faces when you asked that question, and I'm not gonna ask Dr. HP to come up because his face said something different. But anyway, there was a lot of information and tools that they had to complete, and I asked several of them, how do they compare going through this process with the completion of their CIP? One of the reflections that I have that I've shared with several of them is they were better able to talk about specifics in their data as a result of going through this process, and not just at a high level, but all the way down to the teacher level. Several of them have developed their own building formulas for how they plan to reach their goals for this year, not just for students, but for teachers as well, and not just world peace, all kids, but really looking at from an equity lens about all kids in their schools. It doesn't matter what ethnicity or socioeconomic group that they're in. I was more impressed this time meeting with, how many did we meet with? 27 schools. We had schools that receive A's that came through and learned things as a result of going through this process is going to help them even grow more than just completing their SIP. Now, that process did require a lot of paperwork. It did require a lot of meetings. It required them to really get parent feedback, parent ownership in that as well. And so I think the process was great. I think what the principals did and the ones that I came in and met, I'm much more assured that they know exactly what they need to do and how they need to do it. And for the ones that need additional support it gives us a feedback as to what we can do to go out and support them to be able to meet the goals that they have. Is that right, HP?
Can we bring up Principal Brown?
Yes. At this time, I'd like to introduce again to you the principal of Bailey Middle School, Mrs. Chandra Brown.
Thank you.
Guys, first and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here. I thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you and to lead with some wonderful people. The first thing that I do want to say is we've received a lot of support from everyone involved. And so when she says that we were at Region 4 at the training, our chiefs were there with us, our leaders were there with us, and they were supporting us in this work. And then us being there together, we were able to bounce ideas off of each other, and it made a huge difference. The one thing to note about the Effective Schools Framework process is it's just best practices, all right? So it's not something additional that we're doing. It's the great work that moves schools forward, and it breaks it down into those domains. And so most of us had these pieces outlined in our SIP, and as Lift 6 campuses, it aligns perfectly to what we're already doing. So we did have to go in and do some more work, but it's aligned to the work that we're already doing. And that was a big aha moment for me when I was sitting there going through the training with my colleagues. The other thing to note is after we went to the training, we did have a Saturday session where we brought our leadership teams together. And again, our leaders were there with us engaging in the work. I can remember sitting with Chief Hill and Chief Bradford, and they were just as excited about the turnaround pieces as we were, if not more so. And so that was a blessing. So as we were talking through the things that we were going to do and looking at our data, they were there in that work with us. And what we were able to realize as a campus was we've spent a lot of time putting in with culture. So we had a lot of artifacts related to our school culture and how we were working to turn that piece around. And now it's time for us to focus on the academic piece. And so from that particular session, we came up with 3 areas that we were going to focus in on, and all of those related to our curriculum and our instruction pieces. After we did that Saturday session, we had a parent input meeting. Our parents came together and we got their input on what they felt like we needed to focus on, and it was aligned to what we felt we needed to focus on, which was the curriculum piece. And they said they could see the changes in school culture. They appreciated the communication that was happening and the positive pieces, but they wanted to know more about our curriculum specifically and where our kids were. And then they said they wanted to help us, right? And so after that, we were able to have some PTO meetings to get our parents and our community involved. And so that's been a big rock for Bailey as well. And so at our most recent PTO meeting, we have parents who are going to be coming in and they want to engage in our work around curriculum and instruction. They want to provide incentives for our students when they are doing well, and they want to specifically go in and assist teachers, tutor where they can. So there's a movement happening there as well, and it's involving, again, our parents and our community based on what they know we need to work on at Bailey. All of our campuses did the parent input meeting, and they have some realizations that they've had there as well. And the great part about it is, again, with the Lift 6 piece, we work together. And so today, the principal of Wells, she was at Bailey. Last week, I was at Wells. And so we're partnering. I was just at Bammel yesterday. So we're learning and we're growing together. When it comes to trustee engagement, here is what we would love for you guys to do. The first thing, the foundational thing, is please keep believing in us. We know that, when you see that F label, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So your continued belief in this turnaround process and the fact that we will turn around, it makes a world of difference. We ask that when you see something positive happening on our campus, don't be afraid to share that out and be our positive mouthpiece, because there's a whole lot of other media out there. But if you're speaking positively about the things that we have happening, it makes a world of difference. And then last but certainly not least, don't be afraid to come to the campus. We tweet quite a lot about the different events and things that we have going on. If you see something happening that you want to be a part of, we welcome you, we welcome your presence, and we appreciate any support you're willing to lend to us. When it comes to next steps, the thing about the Turnaround Improvement Plan is very similar to the CIP, at where we have our reviews, where we have to go back in and we have to look at what we said we were going to do and match that up with the evidence of, actual implementation, and we have to report on those pieces every quarter. Additionally, we have those pieces for our CIP. The great thing about it is we do have Dawn Oliver, and I'll say she's been lockstep with me. Everything that I put in my CIP, any deadline that I have, she has my cell phone number, all of ours, and she'll call us up and say, hey, this is due, or this is what we said we were going to do. How can I help you get it done? And so that's what makes the difference. So we're going to continue growing, but we do have our progress measures that we have to meet, and all of our principals are working to do that. And I'm going to say this because I think it's important. When I came to Spring, there was no misconception about the work that was ahead. I was very clear about where our schools were and then where we were trying to go. And so I knew that there would be some late nights, and some extra time that we would have to put in as leaders, and I explained that to my staff as well. And so, yes, it is additional work, but it's expected work, and I think that it's going to yield some major results for our students and for our communities. Any question, input, feedback?
I think you partially answered this one. But Dr. Watson handed a sheet of suggested questions. And we appreciate that support, Dr. Watson. But the ones that really came out at me, one was, how can the school board support you? And we can certainly believe in you. It's hard to explain to people sometimes that you can have an A experience in an F-rated school, or you could have an F-rated experience in an A-rated school as a child or a parent and that sort of thing. But what I'm really interested in, because we're here to support you, is do you feel confident that you know who to contact if you need support?
Most definitely. And again, I'm very blessed in that I have a direct supervisor who has 3 schools. And so that goes back to the Lift 6 piece. Dr. Perez and Ms. Farinas, both, I can contact either of them. And if there's a resource that I need to reach out to someone else for, they can tell me exactly who I need to reach out to and get me their phone number, right? But everybody is very accessible, and if I don't know specifically which department, I can always reach out to either one of those individuals, and they can tell me where to go.
And it sounds like the principals are all talking to each other, right?
Most definitely.
It just seemed to always be my peers in whatever occupation I was in that really gave me a lot of wonderful advice and encouraged me along. So I want to make sure you have that support.
Most definitely.
Okay.
Some of the most supportive people I've ever met in a school district. Dr. Hyder and Principal Williams over at Twin Creeks have been in the district for quite a while, and they serve as mentors for me. And so if there's any, like, I can text at any time and they're available. The turnaround time when dealing with Kanisha is like instant, right? And so we have those pieces as well, where we have our peers and we do have our supervisors who are very supportive as well. And Chief Hill has been amazing also. Everybody's really supportive, but I have their cell numbers where I can call if there's anything I need.
So I did have a question, and I'm really happy to hear that you feel supported and we're getting where we need to be, especially from a leadership perspective. But how are we getting your staff engaged and on board and where we're going?
Yes, at Bailey, and that's another piece where this is not extra work. We started the work this summer, and so what we did was we called our teachers in, the ones who were staying, because, you know, we lost quite a few, and we asked, you know, what are the problems happening here at Bailey? And based on their responses, we formed committees, and those committees are responsible for a lot of the work that we've done thus far at Bailey, and they're responsible for the action steps that we have thus far. So, for example, at Bailey, one of the big things was discipline across the board. We have a discipline committee that started this summer that has been instrumental in developing our positive behavior support plan, our incentive pieces, all of our pieces related to student discipline and culture. It was developed by that committee that then engaged all of the other staff members. So that's one example.
And the committee is made up of the staff members.
Most definitely.
I will say your presentation does inspire some confidence. I think I can speak for everybody else.
It does.
Especially like in response to my impolitic question and Rodney's response, your grasp of what we are doing to make these changes. I do have some questions about how you guys arrived at your goals. As we as a board are working on developing district-wide goals, so I'd love to hear what your thought process was in determining the goals for your schools and how you were going to improve student growth.
The beauty of this process is that it's very specific, and it could seem tedious at first, but the more we went through it, the more we realized, oh, this was necessary to kind of sift out what the goal should be. So in our particular case, there were templates that we worked through that required us to really look at specifically, piece by piece, what we have enough evidence to support good implementation of, and then what we didn't have evidence to support a strong implementation of. And it was aligned to this 5 pieces for the framework. Once we lined up all that evidence piece by piece, we were able to specifically see, wait, we have a whole lot of evidence over here because we've been working with committees and we've been rebuilding the culture, but we don't have as much evidence over here. And so that's where we focused our goals at, the places where we saw that there were gaps. And there's a gap analysis that we do as a part of this process. There's some big gaps, there are some smaller gaps. And there are some different approaches that you can take based on the framework. So it really was looking piece by piece and analyzing what we're doing well and what we need to improve upon. And it was a structured, systemic way that we did it across campuses.
Thank you.
What was one of your biggest gaps?
Our biggest gap was curriculum and instruction, lesson planning, and then ensuring that we have the data-driven instruction, and then ensuring that we have an aligned curriculum, that what we're doing on campus is fully aligned to the state standards and it's fully aligned to the district curriculum. Those were our three biggest gaps.
When you had your meeting with your community or reached out to them, what did you learn most from them? What were they looking for?
They were really candid about the fact that they could see that there were some positive changes happening at Bailey, but they also did express that, hey, you know, you've got this one rock star teacher over here that sends out communications all the time, and I know where my kids are, but it's not so much over here. And so they were wanting consistency across the campus when it came to communicating about curriculum and instruction. I remember talking last time about specifically what is my student struggling in? Which TEKs are they working on this week? That's what they want. They want to know that, and then they want to know how they can help their child at home. And so what we're planning across Lift 6 campuses, we have 2 really big parent engagement events that are going to be coming up, where we're going to have the student-led data conferences where the students will talk to their parents specifically about those pieces. And then as a result of their feedback, we'll be having an academic parent engagement event where they can come in and get those pieces that they are looking for, specifically literacy, math, science, social studies, what your child is going to be tested on. All of those pieces, we want to go ahead and give those to our parents so that they're empowered to help their students.
So, I don't know if I'm going too far, Dr. Watson, but has your school specifically been, since your parents are so interested in this and this was one of their goals, is the program Schoolology? Is your school teachers, are they trained? Have they been trained?
Yes.
In Schoolology such that they can have this information available for parents by computer?
Most definitely. And so the teachers, and see, that's where we discovered, okay, we've got to pay close attention to that gap. Yeah. Because if you train, you can train the teachers on it, and the teachers can put it out there. But if you don't bring the parents in and teach them how to access it, right, there's still that gap. And we make assumptions sometimes. We assume that our parents are computer savvy and that they're going to log on to those pieces and look at those pieces. And so bringing parents in and teaching them how to access these pieces and how to use them at home with the students, that's going to be the game changer for our campus. And that's where we discovered the gap was.
Yeah, I can co-sign that. I got my students' MAP scores, and yeah, that's definitely happening. I'm also very impressed. I'm looking at your TIP, and I'm very impressed that you have your 3 areas for development here. They're right on. It's like you have this memorized, so I'm just impressed.
Thank you so much, guys.
Well, before I ask that question, you have this dynamic plan, and you all are working, it sounds like, very, very well. But if by chance one of your goals you fall short, are there any plans to go back, repeat to how we're going to come back and work with our students, our teachers, and our community, our parents, again, to redouble your efforts again?
Yes.
To get them
so
out.
That's with any
if
plan,
we fall short.
Yes.
Now, we're hoping that you do not.
Well, you know that happens, and you plan for that, right? So with any plan, it's a work in progress, and it's a living, breathing document. And so if we fall short on one of our goals, my plan is always to reach out, number one, to my support system, which I know I have a strong one in Spring ISD, and to double back and figure out where we went wrong, right? And see if we can rework it with our new knowledge. And so failing forward is a thing. if by chance we do fail on one of the pieces, figuring out what we went wrong with and how we can use that knowledge to move us forward. Dr. Perez says it best. He says sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And so that happens.
Thank you.
Do you
Thank
have any area that you're feeling a little uncomfortable with?
Right now, I will say, because our three big rocks are curriculum related, the one challenge that I know is ahead is getting everybody on the same page and everybody consistent with their level of content knowledge. And I was just texting Ms. Farinas about this. Middle school is different in that you can be a generalist, right, and be responsible for teaching math.
That was me.
Yeah, and if you're in that situation, you need a little bit more professional development as it relates to understanding the math content. Because if you just came fresh out of the alternative certification program and you're a generalist, you've got to get those pieces together. And so that's one piece that we're working on as a campus.
Now, have your campus worked with, or your team thought about how you're going to work with your feeder schools, these kids that are coming to you from elementary there? And what are your plans for sharing what you're doing and working with the high school that your kids will be going to, so that all the feeder schools there together will be kind of working on the same goal, same picture all together here?
So bridging that connection is a big piece for us. I will say that one of our major focuses for this year is making sure that Bailey is stable. And then once Bailey is stable, we'll start looking at that. But we are uniquely situated in that we're right across the street from Burchett.
Exactly. They got to be successful for you to be successful.
That's been a fun connection because, she's my sister principal. She's right across the street. We send our kids there. And so there's a very positive working relationship there. And once we have a good foundation, like that house up there, we'll work on building it out.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Just one additional thing. When I was reading over the minutes from the September 5th meeting, I believe it was welcome to all these new campus leaders. And I started looking at some of these names and think, now those look familiar. And so we have new campus leaders at 3 of our schools that are the TIP schools. And I just, we have Christine Goodry, Goodry? And Stacy Rogers as newest principal. And I just wondered, along with you, Ms. Brown, how are you handling being a new principal and this TIP challenge?
Come on up.
Okay, come on.
That was your introduction.
While they come up with all of the principals that have tips that are here this evening represented, would you just stand up so the board, we can recognize you?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Just like Ms. Brown said, the process was very guided in terms of us being able to determine, as we gathered our artifacts, where we needed. We realized one of the things Don kept telling us is no artifact or no evidence is evidence, that we need to implement some pieces. And so it was, especially for me as a new leader on a campus that came in with a team that came in right before school started, we have continuously been adjusting. So we are resetting, and part of that just to the goal of how do we ensure we meet our goal, or how do we really make sure that we are in our process being very thoughtful and intentional. There are timelines within it that we go through and monitor our progress. And so really being very intentional with that work. So as we look at where we are, knowing those pieces. So again, I concur with Ms. Brown that Wells it's been in the making for a while. And so part of that work as we are, when school started, again, just really working to build that culture. We're really trying to get to we're at a point where the academic piece is our focus. And so really working with individuals on the campus, both new to and those that have been there, and bringing them together to ensure that they have the instructional knowledge, the ability to look at their data and make some determinations and formulate instruction around it is where our work is now. And we are using this process very thoughtfully to ensure that we get where we need to be at the end of this year.
And let me redirect that question I asked Ms. Brown. If you need help, are you confident you know who to contact?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely. There are several threads on my phone of information and questions just even within our group for Lift 6, and that's one of the pieces, being in the Lift 6 and going through the work together. A lot of those pieces have been formulated so that we are able to have those discussions and talk to each other and reach out at those odd hours of the evening or weekend or whenever else to be able to say, have you or do you have, or, you know, can you share with me? And they've been fantastic. And again, Dr. Hyder and Ms. Williams have really helped to lead that by giving us their willingness to share their experience with us. And I appreciate that very much so.
Dr. Watson, who completes the self-assessments? So there's a part in the tip where they talk about implementation levels and where they are from 1 to 5. So for the new principals, that's the case as well?
May I answer? Hi, good afternoon.
Okay.
We completed that self-assessment with our teams. So for those of us who were new to the campus, it was helpful to have that leadership team because there are things we just didn't know coming into the campus. So the self-assessment process is where we got our essential actions from. We were able to look at, and Ms. Guidry talked about this a little bit, places where there weren't systems in place, so that wasn't a bad thing. That was a thing where we needed to focus. So not going, oh my gosh, I don't have evidence for this, but this is something I need to focus on in order to meet those 3 essential actions. And Dr. Hinojosa and I actually had a conversation at Region 4 about Lift 6 and the essential framework. It's so tied together that this was a big undertaking, and you guys asked about the time. It was a lot, but then it wasn't a lot because we were able to tie the things that we're already doing into systems and making sure those systems are in place so that we're going to get where we need to go.
I imagine you probably learned a lot, too.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
you
ma'am.
realized what you did not have that you needed.
Yes,
you learned
absolutely.
a lot as well.
Are you going through
that.
culture shock from high school to middle school?
There are some things.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for sure, thank you for your jump drive that, as you can tell, we probably sitting here going through your plans right now, looking at them with our jump drive here. So thank you. It made it easy for us.
I wanted to thank you for your time tonight, and if there are other questions that I can answer for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Are there any other questions this evening for me or for Dr. Cobb?
I know your community will be interested in hearing your results. How it's
Yes.
going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam President. I just wanted to add that on Tuesday night, we will have a public hearing on the tips for you and the Board of Trustees to approve.
Thank you. Thank you. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Westbrooks. And Ms. Westbrooks, as we look through this, I am so excited about this. Anytime we get extra money, the board gets real excited. And what we can do for our community, what we can do for our students, our staff, our teachers. So, yes. They're asking if we can excuse our principals by all means. And we'll just take a little 5 to 10 minute break. Right quick, please. Thank you. If we could have your attention, we will come back from our break at 8:01. Thank you. And I think we're happily ready to come back to our break because we have Ms. Westfield to talk to
Westfield.
us. I mean, Westfield.
Westfield on
See
the
how
bus.
excited
Proud
I am?
Mustang, proud Mustang.
Ms. Westbrook to talk to us about our one-time revenue and expenditure fund that we have here. And as the board know, we're excited because we are always happy to get additional funds to share with our staff, with our district, with our teachers, custodians, everybody.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
please share with us what you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Newhouse, Dr. Watson, and members of the board. So we always bring our comprehensive annual financial report to the board in November. And of course, that practice will remain, and we will bring that to you at the November board meeting. But prior to bringing it to you, we wanted to bring some very exciting information, as Ms. Newhouse has already spoken on, to your attention, because when we would bring that CAFR to you all, you would have had a bit of sticker shock and said, where did all this come from? So we wanted to talk you through that tonight, and hopefully on Tuesday, you all can help us with making some decisions that will also help us with how to assign a portion of the 2018-19 fund balance that will be listed on our comprehensive annual financial report next month. So we did, as a district, receive some non-recurring revenues that has resulted in quite a bit of funds that will be added to the district's fund balance, because the funds that we received were received for the 2018-2019 fiscal year. So with that said, the largest number that is contributing to that increase is as a result of Senate Bill 500, which is was a part of the 86th legislative session. It was a supplemental appropriation that was given to the state to divide up for districts that were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. And the intent was to ensure that all districts were held 100% harmless for any loss of local maintenance and operations tax revenue as a result of Hurricane Harvey. And so the calculation was done based upon the property value decline. That was the methodology that was calculated by the Texas Education Agency. And so with that said, the district actually received a total of $12 million as a result of Senate Bill 500. And so those funds were recorded back to the 2018-2019 fiscal year, which again, like I said, will be added to the district's fund balance, which gives us an opportunity now in the 1920 fiscal year to utilize those one-time costs for some one-time expenditures. And so along with that are two other items that you are accustomed to seeing throughout the fiscal year, but some little anomalies happen that actually helped add to those one-time revenues that were available. And so we talked quite a bit about property value audits and how we receive funds a couple of years, sometimes 3 years later, because when the district has changes in property values that result in taxpayer refunds, then eventually the district is made whole through these one-time payments because our state revenue is adjusted for those refunds that we pay. And so that's normal. We've seen that occur many times over the years. Typically, there's one payment that comes in each year, and there's one audit that comes in each year. And what that does is it helps offset that current year's refunds that we've had to give. So it's been a nice something that helps us offset in each year. However, this year, we actually received two payments, one for the 2015 tax year and one for the 2016 tax year. And so those two payments together totaled over $4 million that helped add to this additional revenue that we have. And then the last item that contributed to that, again, an amount that we do see annually and we do budget for, and that is the school health and related services revenue that we receive for Medicaid eligible reimbursement. So typically we would receive one payment per year, but the agency that oversees the reimbursement of these funds did a bit of a catch up with their payments. And so we were notified around mid to late March that we would be receiving an additional payment It's not money that wasn't due to us. It was money that was due to us. We just received it earlier than we typically do. So it resulted in us having 2 payments in that 1 year. And so that additional payment was received on June 7th, right before the end of our fiscal year, after the board had already passed our final third budget review. And that totaled $3.3 million. So with those 3 items, the Senate Bill 500 funding, the extra property value audit funds, and the additional school health and related services SHARS payment, we ended up with a total of $19.5 million. That's one-time funding that is being added to the fund balance that, again, as I mentioned, gives the district the opportunity to take some one-time expenditures into account. And so what we've done is a lot of legwork over the last few weeks and looking through lots of needs, and have compiled a list of requests for the board to consider. And so what I'd like to do is go through the top 7. There's 7 items that have really big ticket items. But of course, any questions that you have, we have everyone here ready to discuss the reasoning and the thought process behind it and provide you with any details that you need. So if we're okay with that, then we can jump into...
Just where did the requests come from?
Where did they come from?
Submitted requests?
Pretty much everyone. Yes. Everyone, for the most part, had some say and some thought process, or in a part of the thought process for these. And then there's some that we knew that the board, when we went through the budget process this last year, that you all wanted to do more. You wanted to do more for our employees, and you wanted to do more to ensure our students' achievement across the district. And so that was top of mind as we were bringing this list together. So you'll see that with the very first item that's listed here. And that is a request for a one-time employee supplement for all employees that are in good standing of $1,000. And we did see that several of our surrounding districts, as a part of their budget process that was passed this past year for a 19-20 budget year, a one-time supplement was done. But for us, we didn't see those funds available as we were preparing our budget, but now the opportunity has arisen. And so that's the top item that we have listed here for your consideration. Okay. So then the next item, again, keeping with the spirit of what can we do to help our campuses and to improve student achievement, one item that we're bringing back for consideration is lowering the student-teacher ratio to 28-1. And so we've talked about one-time revenue, one-time cost. We know that payroll and salary costs are not one-time, they're recurring. And so with this, we are looking at this amount, the $2.5 million, would actually sustain that lower ratio for about 2 years. But what that does is it allows us the opportunity to prioritize that in future budget cycles that would allow us to actually get it into our recurring budget. These funds just give us the opportunity to kickstart that, and it's at an absolute ideal time, especially with what we just heard with our principals, with the targeted improvement plans that they have. The additional staffing, particularly in the classroom, will be helpful in that regard. Okay. Then the next item that I wanted to highlight, of course, is the Spring High School pool renovation. So last month, at the last board meeting, there was a discussion about the circumstances at the Spring High School pool, and Mr. Miranda talked about the assessment that was done to go out and look and see what improvements are needed with the pool. And so we have one option that is the renovation that makes sure that all of the things that are in the assessment are addressed. And that would actually cost closer to $3 million, but we have some funds earmarked in the bond as part of our deferred maintenance for $1 million. So this would be the additional cost that it would take to cover those renovations for the Spring High School pool.
Weren't we going to discuss that on tonight's agenda anyway?
Yes, sir.
So we've already gone out for an RFP or an RFQ for a vendor to do this work?
No, we haven't. These are based on our best estimates from the facility assessment that I included in the board update last month.
Okay. The next item is the West, I'm sorry, yes.
These suggested expenditures, are they hard and fast, or are they up for discussion, or?
Everything is up for discussion.
Okay.
They're only recommendations. Yes, ma'am.
I am a little worried about some of the items I'm seeing, and I just think they need a little separate discussion. Could you, I'm not worried about this, I just have never heard of NBC News Learn. Could somebody explain that one to me?
Yes, and actually Ms. Bradford has quite a bit of information that she can share with us tonight regarding NBC Learn. And if you look in your blue folder that you have your one-time cost, the very last item, you should have a presentation for NBC News.
Can you finish going through the list though first?
Okay, oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. We'll do that. Okay, so the next item after the Spring High School pool renovation is the Westfield Ninth Grade Center additional scope. And so we know the Ninth Grade Center is a renovation as opposed to the Westfield one is a renovation as opposed to the Spring High and Decaney or new build. And so we're requesting here an additional $6 million to allow us to ensure that we have comparable student learning spaces at the Westfield campus like we do or we currently have for the Decaney and the Spring High School building. And so the cost in order to do that would be this $6 million. And with that, we do actually have a pretty hard quote estimate on what that additional cost would be.
Is this expanding square footage? What's it doing?
It's not expanding square footage. It's enhancing some of the things that we had looked at before when we first looked at the ninth grade center. So it's things like the main entry, the rear courtyard, moving the HVAC plant out of the rear courtyard, and having the dining commons and the media center and all of those things be a little more comparable to what we're building new at the other two campuses.
So this is above and beyond what's already on the drawing board, or are we going to have to do this anyway?
This will get us to what was on the complete drawing board, yes. So the answer is it'll get us to what's on the drawing board.
So I'm thinking back to the conceptual renovations that you. So will it look significantly different?
It will not. So if without this, it will look significantly different. This will get us what we saw.
So Mark, talk a little bit about the bid process of where we are with Westfield in terms of.
So right now we have a GMP that's actually on the agenda tonight, and so that right now Westfield has begun its abatement for asbestos, and so that's been a previous GMP that you guys had approved. There's another one on tonight that's primarily for more interior work that they're going to be doing and giving us some allowances so that they can begin paying for long lead items like mechanical systems and different things. So that's on the agenda for tonight. This money will get us the full design that we were able to see before. As we go into and we got into the process with the GMP process with the contractor and the architect, we started seeing that we were going to have to scale back from that, and we didn't want to have to do that in order to keep the equity with the other ninth grade centers.
And what's the rationale not using bond money and using this? We wouldn't have that $6 million in bond money?
No, ma'am.
Because one of the things we didn't want to do when we think of the total scope of how much it's costing to build Spring Ninth Grade Center in Decaney, remember, we originally went in with only spending $12 million for Westfield.
Correct.
And so as the principals were getting together and they were in the design phase and all of that, Westfield was like, hey, our building doesn't look anything like the others. And so we had originally, before we knew we were getting this, we're going to come to you and say, we're going to have to downgrade that scope even more. Well, now that the money came in, we can keep it exactly what that team designed to go in and to do.
What's this doing to our timeline?
It won't impact the timeline. The good thing is that because it is a reno, if you've been by Spring and Decaney, they're coming on really nicely, but they're still in frame, and they have some slab work that's being done, site work that's being done. This one's already enclosed, and so it's not going to be behind timeline.
Well, I definitely want the Westfield Ninth Grade Center to be as a wonderful facility to support education as the others. I think that is money well spent. JROTC facility design. Dawn, do you want to? Anybody want to talk to that one?
So I wanted to explain the terminology behind that, because once the Westfield Ninth Grade Center is open, then those students will, about approximately 900 students will come out of the building and will go into the Westfield Ninth Grade campus. And so that will open some space up in the Westfield main building, and these dollars would be used to redesign that space to accommodate the JROTC program at Westfield. Okay, so I'll move to page 2.
Before,
Yes, sir.
for that, I can talk a little bit about NBC Learn if we want to come back to that, but just the Asia Society. What is that?
Yes, good evening, board members. The Asia Society really deals with the International Study Schools Network, and so this would help us develop the global competencies in our schools, really looking at potentially building a school within a school model at certain schools, but also embedding this within our curriculum. So it really helps us build that global perspective and joining an international study school network. So it's curriculum, it's resources. They have a great plethora of resources. It's also some professional learning, but it's the ability to network with those global and international study schools. We're looking specifically at like our Springwoods Village Middle School, who has that global competency with the International Baccalaureate program. Also looking at some of our middle schools as really a way to recruit and retain our students and their families at the middle school level, just to offer that specialty and to give us another edge and lens as we look at building college and career and global readiness for our students.
And just on NBC, thank you.
Yes.
And NBC Learn, I just found out about them because we had a big symposium we hosted over at our university. So I didn't know a whole lot about them a week ago, and so they have a robust program. PBS is also another organization that does PBS Learn too. So I would think that's part and parcel. Okay. All right.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
With NBC Learn, it's a digital platform that we can utilize within Schoology that gives our teachers access to mini lessons, curricular resources, current events, as well as archives. We can search digitally with looking through TEKS, and we really thought this would be a great engagement strategy. Also connects to things like research, STEM. They highlight engineers, people that are in the field right now, a great STEM connection. Completely integrated with like language arts, math content. So we really thought that our teachers would greatly appreciate this resource being available to them within Schoology. It just adds to both the rigor of our lessons and also the engagement, keeping it relevant, keeping it student friendly as we look at blended learning opportunities.
Great.
Okay. So the last 2 really large items I wanted to highlight before we go through each item, or which items you all may have some additional questions on, are the last 2 items on the list, and that's the Lift 6 specialties and the student desk and chairs at the Lift 6 campuses. And so that's our 6 comprehensive middle schools, of course. And so with the Lift 6 specialties, the concept behind this is that we would transform all of our Lift 6 campuses into some form of a specialty campus. And so the methodology here is to allocate approximately $100,000 to each of the Lift 6 middle schools to allow for the startup cost and whatever it is that's needed in order to help get those specialties off the ground, so to speak. And so an example of that would be, as Ms. Bradford mentioned, the Springwoods Village program, the interbaccalaureate, probably saying that wrong, the IB program at Springwoods Village. There were some initial costs that we had, training, materials, and things of that nature that helped them open that campus as a campus that was pursuing the IB designation. And so if we were to move into that same direction with the Lift 6 campuses, then of course we would have startup costs related to that as well.
So one of the things that we've done through the middle school tour was we got feedback from parents, and we know that our parents want opportunities and choice, which is in our 5-year strategic plan. As we know, we have a lot of outside opportunities and choice being built in our community, and if we don't continue to look at ways to provide our parents choice, they may choose to do other things. And so this gives us opportunities to really look and to determine what is it that is going to be a niche at any one of the 6 comprehensive middle schools. For example, there are middle schools that are looking at being a global learning school. And so this gives us opportunity to go in and really start looking at what does that take, what does that mean, what resources are available. We have a particular middle school that wants to look at arts integration as a means of students coming there and having a particular focus of arts integration in and outside of the curriculum. And so right now we're still in the investigation phase, but this provides resources to be able to start planning, much like we did with Spring Leadership Academy and Springwoods Village and Robertson.
One of the tidbits I picked up at this leadership conference that I was at from the superintendents is the use of academies within schools to retain students and, attract parents, right? So you have, for example, a leadership or science academy within BAML that attracts parents from, around the district. I like it.
Okay, here's my concern. Of course, I'm going for the science supplies. And you can see that the high school supplies are twice as much as the middle school, and they're 4 times as much as the elementary school. But when I'm looking at the elementary and middle schools, it seems like it's more science supplies, even though there's less money spent there. And what really concerns me is the first page of the high school science material requests. When you're doing all these paper products and glue and I know that there's a lot of modeling or dry labs, sometimes they call them in biology, that go on. But I'm just very concerned because I've been in a stockroom that had one real thermometer in it that actually could measure with some accuracy biological systems. And they don't have enough beakers, they don't have enough graduated cylinders or of the different sizes. I'm just worried that not all the high school departments have adequate representation in this list. If they could just go look at it again. We're supposed to have 40% lab by law in our science courses. And it has to be supported with, like if I flip the page on the high school, it looks like the chemistry department has ordered quite a few actual lab supplies. They're going to get their 40% in. There are no meter sticks in the biology department. I personally bought a bunch of tape measures so that they could measure some things. It's just they are so sadly lacking in some absolutely basic lab materials for measurement. Volumetric measurement, pipettes. I'm just saying that I've seen a lot of need there, and they're not going to get it with pretty paper and balloons and manila folders and that sort of thing. This looks like you need those things, but that shouldn't be all the whole lab supplies because they're not even lab supplies.
Yes, thank you. We
what
can
I'm saying.
definitely go back. We did bring together high school teachers and department chairs from each of the high schools, actually met at Winchie for a large group conversation, and really shared basically a lot of your ideas also about having the carts for teachers to utilize, also going in with their department chairs and finding resources that are available already at their campus that just because of teachers moving, they might not have had in the right rooms, so that we really can stock their daily labs. We did also note that requirement for the 40%. We really looked at this year, because we have new curriculum, ensuring that everything in here we would have opportunities for teachers to really utilize, just aligned, of course, to our EOC goals, looking at biology. So that was our initial process to really get teacher voice in it, but definitely we can go back and look at and ensure that it meets all of the criteria.
I'm just saying that if you, they're teaching biology with colored paper balloons, we've got popsicle sticks, index cards, rubber bands, sticky notes. You can certainly use Ziploc bags in some labs, but I am just not seeing lab supplies. Like if I go to the middle school science, oh my goodness, they're spring scales. You can use those in biology. They got the meter sticks. They got measuring tape that I already bought for Decaney. They're okay. But graduated cylinders, I'm not sure timers are worth much anymore. People use cell phones better than that. Also, why in the world they want the graphing calculators when there's all kinds of computer-based probes and that sort of thing that you could be using? And that's one of these things that's really missing here. And I have no idea what's already there in all the schools, because sometimes you'll open up a cabinet and, oh my gosh, there's all these wonderful Pasco probes, and they're in one room, and on another floor in another closet is the thing that you attach the probes to. So I'm just saying that I would love to spend the money. I'd like to spend more. But I just think people need to go look at what they're doing and think about this a little more deeply. And I've seen this because biology teachers are so pressured to teach. Really, a lot of it's low-level, direct memorization type of things to do well on the biology EOC. And I don't want the biology EOC to rule our life. I know we're all under the gun here to perform for the state of Texas. But, you know, the state of Texas is also asking for 40% labs. And that's labs, that's science labs. That's not modeling, that's not cutouts, that's not, I've seen coloring on maps and that sort of thing. That's not a science lab. That's what I'm very concerned about for spring. And I can tell you, anybody who knows science will be concerned about it.
Yes, we'll note it.
Okay.
We'll go back
Yes, we will.
and have a revised high school list for
Yes.
Tuesday.
Yes, we will
We'll add
revise
some
the high
different
school.
teachers to come.
I'll try to write up my concerns so
Okay.
that if you can share them, they can all
Yes,
say,
definitely.
complain about it, say
Okay.
forget it. But, you know,
I love
I
her
worked in
passion.
a science lab. My daughters are scientists. This isn't going to get you in science. It ain't going to get you there. Now, the middle school, that looks like that it's a good beginning. And then you get to high school and you're working with paper.
Right.
You know. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
We appreciate her passion, plus she just cleaned out several storerooms at Decaney, so.
Wonderful things,
And
but
found
not
one.
enough of them.
I did have a question. I wanted to actually go back to the one-time employee in good standing supplement, $4,000, which is amazing. But I would like to do something in addition to that for our paraprofessionals. What can we do with regards to our paraprofessionals? They didn't get included in this last increase. I know we're paying a larger percentage of their benefits. I've actually been out a lot lately talking to the community. and I'm hearing a lot from paraprofessionals. So, can we speak to that?
Absolutely. And so for clarity, when you say paraprofessionals, are you speaking campus level paraprofessionals, in the classroom paraprofessionals, or all paraprofessionals? All?
I'm talking about in the classroom.
Classroom, okay.
That's, I don't know if my colleagues would define that, but for me, it's those that are in the classroom, supporting teachers, engaging and directly impacting student performance and discipline.
Yes. Got it. And so when you say more, you want us to explore that and bring back some options, or did you have something specific in mind? Explore it and
I
bring
didn't
up
have
some
anything
options.
specific.
Okay.
I just feel that we haven't given them as much as we have to teachers,
okay,
librarians, and counselors. We need to maybe look at doing something extra for them at this point.
We'll put our heads together and bring something back for Tuesday.
So let me get a little bit more clarification. So what we can do is come back and look at, because one of the only hesitancy I have is I agree with you. I think that's a category of people, much like we did with bus drivers and custodians, that we need to go through and look at and exploring. And so there's a couple of ways. Either we can do that like we've done those others and come back during our budget time and make them, like librarians, a specialty that we look at. The only thing that I'm hesitant on is when we do that and call out one group with a one-time supplement and give them more, I always get the other groups to come to me and say, why didn't you all do us as well? And so the normal process that we've done, unless you want us to do it different, is we'll take that in and we'll make that a priority in the budget, and we'll work with them, call them in, do the HR does the survey across all the districts to find out where we are, and then we'll close that gap. But this is a one-time supplement for all employees, and one of the things that we did was said we wanted to treat everyone equal and give everyone the same, doesn't matter what position you are, but if we give them, this is all employees. This includes them already.
Yeah, but we've done for teachers, we've done for librarians, we've done for bus drivers.
And
we've
yes,
done
we've
for the
increased their
counselors.
salaries.
Who have we missed?
Nobody.
If we call them out and they say, why them, what other group could possibly come to you that we haven't?
There's a lot of different groups that are on the same pay cycles that don't get different things. When we've changed their salaries, we've changed it in their salary. So we wouldn't be increasing their salary. This is just a one-time supplement. And so this would only be 1 year, and then they wouldn't get it again next year. And I think what you're wanting us to do is to add it so they get it every year.
No. Well, yes, I want that as well.
Oh, you want both of them?
But
Okay.
for this one-time supplement, I would really like to see. I realize this is for all employees, but again, to them it's going to be that's what everybody gets. There's still nothing for us. And the only thing I know that we've heard from them for several years, and I know the one thing I know we did was we're paying a larger percentage of their benefits. But from a financial perspective, what else have we done? And I feel like we've addressed a lot of our.
Okay, we'll go back and look at it and bring something back Tuesday.
So I also would like to hear from my colleagues, because I don't want to be speaking alone. I'm the only one bringing this forward.
Well,
So before you do a lot of work, let's make sure.
When we increased the percentage of their benefits, wasn't that essentially a pay increase for them? Am I understanding that wrong? Right. Okay.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And we also, I wanted to note that I know one group that has been consistently vocal about their responsibilities versus their pay was our case paras, and that was our special ed paraprofessionals in the classroom that work with our neediest students. And during the budget process, we actually did about a 6 to 7% increase for that group of paraprofessionals in the 1920 budget.
Yeah. So, what's the time frame on this one time for everybody? What did you guys have in mind?
As far as the supplement?
Yeah.
We were thinking to use the same time frame as we did the retention supplement last year, which would be the November 25th payroll.
They did it for the holidays.
Yeah. So that kind of plays into if we want to do something long term for pairs, that's going to run up against that.
Well, when they say employee here, doesn't that include parents?
It includes,
Okay,
I'm
$1,000.
not disputing that.
Okay. Sorry, Don.
Dr. Watson, since there's a concern, is there any way we can have that conversation in next budget year to study and analyze it and see if we can do it for those folks she's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally up to you all. If that's a priority,
I'm
then
just
we take that as the
asking.
priority and we make it happen.
Just asking, can we consider that? Madam President?
Yeah, that can be a priority for us for the next budget.
That way,
She has already indicated that.
So, I would ask, Chief, here, probably more than I do, where do you think the need is? Is there one?
There are several needs, and what the conversation I typically have every year is that we look at groups across the organization and we try to look at a group or two this year, and then we'll look at another, and it's all based off of priority, but there's always going to be regardless of what the increase is, it's always going to be a group that says, why not me, and why didn't you look at me this particular year? And unfortunately, based off of funding, we're not able to do everybody at the same time. One of the things that we are doing, and was talking about it, is that we're going to do a study for our entire district and looking at opportunities that we have in our pay scales to determine where is the greatest need. And I think that, from my perspective, it's taking a look at that study and then bringing that back to the budget process for next year to determine what is the greatest need as we go into 2021 versus trying to do an offset right now.
I think that that study around looking at equability across is excellent. I'm looking forward to hearing the results. Am I the only one of my colleagues that hear a lot from paraprofessionals about this?
That's there, I heard it.
I haven't, but I don't doubt that that's an issue.
I mean, even if we took from somewhere else, but if I had asked for comments from my colleagues, if I heard you all correctly, the consensus is y'all want to wait till the budget process.
I think I shared Dr. Watson's concern about making this a sustainable increase for them and not be a one-time thing. We're basically giving them a Christmas bonus. We can't call it that, but it's essentially what we're doing. And I want
No retention supplement for employees in good standing.
Very good.
That's a mouthful.
I'll try to adopt that. But I do like I'd like, if we're going to do something for a group of employees, I'd like it to be sustainable within our budget. So.
And then we can wait on the data.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did have, were you going to address the final one, and then I have one more about
I have one too, so.
the final,
Yes, the desk and chairs.
yeah, please.
Yes, sir. And so that was, we've actually been hearing quite a bit from our middle school campuses about their needs as far as desk and chairs. And when you have your neighbors that are opening up brand new campuses and they're seeing these beautiful learning spaces and all of that, you want some comfortable things in your building as well that's conducive to the learning environment, particularly the 21st century learning environment. And so we've done some analysis with what we have and have come up with a way to change out the student desk as well as the teacher desk and chairs in each one of the classrooms in our Lift 6 middle schools.
Okay. And then the final one for me, and I see Coach Amendola here, is the relocate district track to Decaney High School. I think we might have had, I did.
He disappeared.
Okay, he disappeared.
He stayed all night as soon as we wanted him.
He has shared lots of information with me.
Yeah, so my assumption was this: once we open the new stadium, since that new stadium is not getting a track, my assumption was that George would be the place where we would have the track. If we have track meets, I know Houston Track has used it before, but I think he had indicated to me once something about Dekaney, and so now I see it. So that's a discussion I'd wanna have, kind of justification for that.
And Mr. Miranda is raising his hand over here and
Yeah,
wants to
there you
speak
go.
to
You're
it.
on the spot now, man.
No, I think there's a couple of things with my assumption as well would be maybe the Spring High School would be the district track facility, but with the work that we're doing on the 9th grade center and the limitation of parking and the facilities around it, the support facilities for track, all of the different pits and different things that you need for it, Willie felt like the other site was a little more feasible for those types of things, to be able to get crowds in, and the way the movement has to happen during a track meet, of different events that are happening simultaneously, he was leaning in that direction.
All right. I mean, I'd like, more conversation on that. And I guess the
need to get Willie here then.
The more longer term, well, just in general, the more longer term question is what are we going to do with George beyond the fact that it's just going to go to Spring for their use? What else are we going to do with it, if anything? It's just a longer term question.
Valid question.
Why wouldn't we put the track near the? I believe with all the new stadiums that are being built now, they're doing away with having the track at the football stadium.
Everybody has their own
That's
track
correct.
facility.
That's not
And
the thing to
Chris,
do now.
in kind of answering your question, your son has participated in track. When you go to a track meet, you have to have room for warm-ups, and that's usually away from the track. It's on the outside, on the outside of the track, where teams are warming up, setting up, and practicing. We don't have that at George Stadium. If you were over at Humble at Turner Stadium, they can hold national competitions because they have that outside area for track meets, for teams to warm up, practice, and before they bring them in to actually come to the track. Athletes cannot be inside on the track, all athletes at one time. You have to bring your event in at one time. All of the other events stay outside of the track. Only one event comes in at a time. So you need that outside land area for them to work, to make that happen.
I'm sure there's justification for it. And like I said, he and I had a real brief conversation about it a couple of months ago. So yeah, okay. I'd like to hear a little bit more about it, but okay.
And
We'll make sure he's here Tuesday, Dr. H.
He was here all night.
And I just texted him, he just left.
No, it's good. It's no problem.
So I did have a question we've got our brand new Springwood Village Middle School. Why are we missing anything from PBA?
So for this item, we actually borrowed some of our band equipment and our art. For band, we borrowed instruments just because of the timeline and materials. And so this list for the PVA department would then stock Springwoods Village Middle School with everything they needed for their band. You'll also see where they have some for their art classes. So it really is to fund the instruments for their band program.
I thought we approved this. Maybe we didn't. Mark, I thought we approved this last year. We was approving the package for Springwood Village. I thought we included all that.
As far as the
And
instruments
PVA
and things.
and everything they needed.
There was
we
a budget.
We approved it. Yes.
Yes, sir. There was a budget that was included in the bond package for Springwoods Village Middle School for performing and visual arts, and that budget had been spent on some of the, what's the word that we use? Fixtures, maybe, for the theater and the dance room, and so we
So
were.
it was not spent. Was approved.
And there were some instruments that were purchased as well.
It was definitely spent on what was
It was
what was
spent
approved
on
for.
PVA, and this was the
short. I don't
So we didn't budget enough for what they needed.
I don't understand that
They
one.
needed more.
They needed more.
Once all the students got there and the students got enrolled, they needed more instruments than what we had, and so they needed more instruments. They borrowed the instruments from Spring High School, so once they get these, they can give the instruments back to Spring.
252?
Yes, that's reduced.
Yes, it is.
This is reduced.
So we really went back through. We looked at exactly the students that are enrolled, which instruments they're playing. And so to start the school up for them to have everything they needed, we really did pull from some of our other band programs. This would then allow us to take those instruments back to the other campuses' band programs, and then for Springwoods Village Middle School to have all of their own resources. We have been in contact with both their band teachers as well as their band boosters, visited out to the school, saw the kids, really looked at what was there. And so we also compared with neighboring districts to gather the list of, just that startup resources. Met with them several times, and so really put together exactly to meet the needs of the students that are there now, and also not including, I think there are 2 instruments, like maybe the flute, where they bring in their own instruments, or their parents usually rent them, and so this would then give them their full band program.
Look, this looks like they don't have anything at all.
Now, one of the things that we have to remember, and it's going to be a future conversation with you all, is just where do we stand on this? Because we do have a long-term history of buying instruments for kids,
That's going to be my next.
and we've done that for years, and so we're having questions saying, why do we do that?
Yeah.
And so, the question is, are we going to continue doing that after this year, or are we going to work with parents like a lot of other districts and they rent them and themselves? But our history in Spring for years is that we buy instruments for kids.
I don't
So here's my question. Are we certain that we don't have existing campuses now that have shortages?
Yes. So we have other one-time cost money that you all have allocated in the past for other campuses to replace instruments that they've had that are in no longer working condition, and you all have done that for multiple years.
Okay, I would hate to buy brand new stuff for a brand new campus, and we've got a campus that's been waiting 2, 3, 4 years for things. That's my question.
Yes, we do have a full outline for replacing instruments at other campuses, and has given us one-time funds for that. And so we have, looking at the middle school programs, looking at the high school programs all across the district. We can share that list with you all to just look at, what's being done. So this is really just above and beyond, because we had done a fix for the campus to get them up and running. We didn't want the students to go without anything for sure. And so then this would give them their own set of instruments there. We would send those other instruments back, but we do have a plan for to replace instruments at all of our campuses.
Yeah, if they need the instruments, they need the instruments.
I think we need to possibly look at them renting them. I mean, because like for all of our other extracurricular activities, are we paying for the other extracurricular things that those students need?
Yeah.
Like, are we paying for uniforms and pom-poms and shoes and things like that? Are we paying for all of that stuff?
So families buy one cheerleading outfit.
Just need to look at all our extracurricular activities, make sure we're across the board, or they need to be renting these. I'd like to find out what other districts charging their students, or are they just allowing them to have?
They charge.
Yes. So we've looked at, we really are trying to stay very comparable with Aldine and Klein, and so our students do pay a band fee, and that really supports, the campus band program and anything that they need on an instructional basis. But then this is something that we have for even when we open Robertson, when we open up a new campus, this has been the standard of the instruments that we've purchased.
So the answer to my question was a little vague. But what you're saying is that there are other campuses and that we're looking into replace. We have a plan for it.
No, we are purchasing for those campuses. So we are, I don't know, Ann, if you want to share that one-time fund fee and the budget that's there, and we are purchasing for those campuses.
And we have the last several years that we've had one-time funds available Performing and Visual Arts has been a consistent group that's been on that list. And so we've just purchased pianos last year. We purchased some trumpets last year. So we've been consistently purchasing instruments and uniforms. All the band uniforms should be nice and shiny and new. This year with our dance team and with our choir, we've been purchasing equipment and supplies for Performing and Visual Arts, believe to the tune of about $500,000 each year, at least over the last 3 years.
So I wonder about, instruments were covered in the bond, is my understanding. And so, like, what I'm wondering is, but for this one-time non-recurring revenue, what would we have done about Springwoods Village Instruments?
So there was a couple of things in the discussion, one of which is when the amount of money was determined that we would need for performing and visual arts, that estimate was taken based upon other school districts and what they do. For example, as we know, Gary was in a district not so far away from us. Most districts don't pay for the instruments, and so when they put the money in for performing and visual arts, it included everything that they needed, including the FF&E. So what happened is the band room and the choir room, everything was done, and most of the time parents will go out and rent their instruments. In spring, we have a history of purchasing those instruments, so that wasn't covered in that because most districts don't go buy all the instruments for the kids.
And there were some instruments that were purchased with bond. This isn't all of the instruments that they need. This is additional to what the bond paid.
Right.
But the bond did pay, as Dr. Watson said, provided a budget that we believed was a standard budget for these services. But Spring is a little different than other school districts.
So Springwoods Village has a higher interest in band than we expected?
It has a higher interest in band than what was expected. I think it.
Yeah, it's not a higher interest, I believe, as Mr. Miranda has explained. When we allocated the budget from the bond, we used an estimate that other middle schools were built on from different districts. But unlike other districts, we pay for the instruments. So the funds that were allocated, we purchased lighting, we did everything that was needed in their black box, in their choir rooms, all of that. However, in spring, we purchased instruments. So we did buy some instruments. This will outfit the classes that they will have. It is not above and beyond. It's actually a much smaller school with less students. It will never get to a size of Bailey or Clowton. So it's a much smaller scale, and this is just the basic instruments that they will need to have, a band program.
And so
basically, it was just hard to predict it.
Architects,
yes.
I got it.
At some point, there was talks that there would be a theater and a dance program as well, and so students would have other options, and so the band, the number of students that would take band based on those other classes would be much smaller. And so those teachers, they don't have that program because it's International Baccalaureate is the focus. So they have language programs, they have a language teacher, they have a CTE teacher, and so the band then is larger than what we anticipated, the number of students enrolled in the band classes. So they actually have 2 teachers that are teaching the band program, and so these instruments are just based on the actual number of students that are in those 8 periods for those 2 teachers.
Springwoods Village, that's the campus that has the really nice practice rooms. The state.
I think
okay.
you're thinking
when we went there,
Robertson.
the band was playing.
Is it
Robert? Yeah, they both do.
Okay.
They both have the individual practice rooms, the Wanger rooms, the risers, the Wanger risers, and so.
So I get what happened. We looked at an average model for a middle school.
Right.
Architect submitted their proposal to us. The difference is our practice in paying for instruments. So I get that. I just want to make sure that we're equitable, we're being fair, and that we've looked at other campuses that have been waiting for instruments and not put this ahead of them.
Yeah,
If they've got borrowed stuff, let them keep their borrowed stuff, and let's work on. And if you all are comfortable with that we've done that, then that's fine. I still am struggling with who all had an opportunity to submit? Are there other needs that aren't here?
Well, I have
That
one.
was my first question, and
I have one. I mean, I think that what this is they're presenting their suggestions, and,
Yeah.
and now we have an opportunity to give our feedback. Because I have one. I can wait for other people to finish, but there's something that I would like to see here that I don't see.
yeah, I just hope everyone had an opportunity to raise their needs.
So everyone did, and talk with what you did as well, what I asked you to do with the high school principals.
Yes, and so I'll start with the middle schools because we visit and speak and talk with principals all the time. And one of the first questions is, do you have the resources that you need in order to do what we're asking you to do? And at the middle schools, the cry for quite some time now has been class size ratio. And so that came up as a part of the 1920 budget and then here again. With the middle schools, Dr. Watson asked me to specifically reach out to each one of the comprehensive high school principals and ask them, what were your needs? And so I had a phone conversation with each of them, and I have their list of items. And Mr. Reynolds sent me another list this morning at about 6 a.m. because he had thought about it and added some more things to the list. So we did reach out and specifically said, okay, what do you need? And it ran from, I really need to offer a stipend to certain positions in order to get the caliber of person that I need to do the work for right now. And things like calculators came up, and we need about 100 calculators. Smart boards was from, I think every principal said they could use some smart boards. So they definitely gave us their list of items and things that they needed. And so that was an individual one-on-one conversation with the principals.
But those calculators are probably for math class.
Yes, well, for the EOC courses, Algebra 1 specifically at Westfield.
Yeah, they're recorded, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And if I may add, Mr. Ant, the other place where we got a lot of the ideas and we actually heard directly from the principals and their schools was during the process when each school came to present their campus improvement plans. And so those campus improvement plans are developed, as you'll recall, from a committee. And the committee's made up of the teachers and parents and community members. And so at that time, they talked about the resources they needed. So, of course, mental notes and making a list. When you heard them present their campus improvement plans, one of the biggest, I think, area that you heard, and I think Dr. Jensen, you actually pointed it out, was the need for a test bank, the test preparation, and where and how can we do that. And so you'll see that money has been allocated directly to their request. And this is even now, as we spent, I'm not even sure how many days listening to the principals that wrote their targeted improvement plan. In their targeted improvement plan, they specifically discussed areas of need. And then, of course, before they left, we asked one more time, is there anything else that you need? Class size at the middle school was a big request, and you'll see it here. And then once again, the resources around the test bank. You'll see that we also included here the lead forward, the discussion around the science and the labs, right? We did have discussions with high school teachers, both from the curriculum side and from the school side, as we wrote their charters where they're working around the board goals for science EOCs, the biology EOCs, the history. And at that time, again, we had teachers from across the district along with assistant principals, associate principals. And so we heard directly from them. So this list is really comprehensive, and it is what, as the administration, we're recommending. However, definitely open, to hear, because you also have, the ear of our staff, our teachers. You're with them every day, and so if there's anything that we've left off the list, absolutely, we want to consider it. But I think from all of our different hats that we wear, whether it's from the finance side, HR, operations, chief of staff working directly with our middle schools, I think we each had the opportunity to sit with, teachers, with specialists, with assistant principals and principals, and heard from them what they really want to see, because this is a great opportunity that we don't want to miss.
Thank you, Dr. Hinojosa. I don't like to rob Peter to pay Paul. I want Paul to get his fair share, and I want Peter to keep his or get his fair share as well. And when you have reached out to all of these entities, from teachers all the way through principals, and they have given you a list of what they need. Even if it was 6 o'clock in the morning, I need another teacher for this or that. And you have listened to them and incorporated this into the plan here. We've left no one out. I'm comfortable.
So thank you.
I'm comfortable with the work that you have done to get us to this point, to see the need that we have here. We're not ever going to satisfy everyone's needs, but we're starting to. We're making a very good effort and doing those things that it could increase the academic achievement of our students, which should be the final goal for us here. So I thank you, Ms. Westbrooks, for letting us know what we have here and taking the time out to research and go through the different steps that you did in determining how this amount of money.
Yeah, I think it's pretty extensive. I'd probably want to ask Chief of Police if he needed anything, but I'm sure y'all have talked.
Our new chief of police has quite a few things on a different one-time cost list.
Right. But and again, just going back to the equipment, I mean, I don't know budgetary wise, but new schools get new stuff, and that's just the way it is. And so if they, in my opinion, if they need that, then they need it. Get the old stuff back.
My comments are, being a retired teacher, being in the classroom, I want to say thanks for taking care of all the employees on the, I guess, one time, I'm going to call it Christmas pay, Christmas bonus. The
Please
one
don't.
time
Please don't.
supplement. I think that's going to be awesome, and it's going to go a long way with our team, our teachers, and everyone that's employed. So, even though I don't agree with the Springwood list, but anyway, I want to thank you for the $1,000 you're giving to our employees.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I thank you for elaborating for me. I just wanted to be comfortable that everyone had input, and I have a lot of confidence in you all narrowing that list down to what we see now.
I think, so I had two things just for consideration. I wonder where we are with our implementation of two-way dual language, and if there's more resources that we could contribute to that as a one-time. I don't know if there's.
So I would like to speak to that. And we had a meeting yesterday with Dr. De La Guardia, as well as Letty Hoke, who are the director of multilingual, and
programs.
Dr. De La Guardia is over that department. And so we met with them yesterday, and she also sent hers. I think I got her list around 7 a.m. this morning, and her list was for the dual language classes in the classroom, some materials that they need, and that was about $28,000, and we have identified another funding source that will take care of those needs. So that was done just yesterday.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Westbrook.
sir.
And then the only other thing was, I had asked about the ICLE rigor and relevance audit that we had done a few years ago. And I think when I asked you about that, Rodney, you said there was a cost associated with having those folks do a follow-up. And so I wonder if that would be something that we might consider doing. I'd like to see if we've progressed.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have is we're getting the end of the year report that they'll be willing to come here and present to you all. One of the things that we've done with that is embedded the rigor relevance framework in our spring rate systems and routines. And so you are going to be getting information actually, it's either monthly or bi-monthly because it's one of your goals, your board goals. So you're going to be getting that update on a bi-monthly basis now instead of once a year. And then we're going to give you a summative report. And so we've been able to infuse that work into our current workings and not pay them $1 million to walk through for us when we can walk through ourselves.
Just an editorial comment. We're not making much progress on this agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrook.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And may I, for just a quick moment, just explain how this will work? So if the board so chooses to approve this on Tuesday evening, what we'll do is when we bring the CAFR to you all in November, you'll see these funds assigned as a part of the assigned fund balance, which means that we have had this discussion, we've assigned that portion of the fund balance, and then we'll budget for it as a one-sided budget entry, and you'll see that when we bring the first budget review to you in November. And then on Wednesday morning, I will get emails saying, when can we start spending the money? So that's pretty much what the process will look like. And so you'll see these numbers come back to you again in November in 2 different ways.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. For our next item, I'd like to again recognize our Chief of Staff, Dr. Julia Hill.
Thank you very much, President Newhouse. Board of Trustees, if you join me on page 26. The one good thing I can say is that was an entire academic conversation, so it'll count toward the minutes. 26. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Let me make sure I didn't skip one.
Did we skip one? I'm sorry.
Let me go to 23 first. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. On page 23, we have a resolution to bring to the Board of Trustees, as we have in the past whenever we've had unfortunate weather incidents, and our most recent one was Tropical Storm Imelda. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because we want to make sure we keep our students safe at all times, we had to close the district. And so as we have in the past, we've come to you to ask for employees to be paid for the day that we had to close the district. And this resolution, unfortunately, is too familiar. We have passed it several times in the past couple of years. And so once again, we want to put before the board an opportunity to pay our employees who were unable to come to work that day.
But they were off anyway, right? Was it
No,
Those are
students were off, but it was a work day for employees.
Okay, but we closed.
It was a district-wide professional development day. So if there are no questions with that, we'll just ask for that to be placed on the consent agenda on Tuesday. So if you could now join me. I'm sorry, did we need it tonight?
I'm sorry, I was hoping we could because we do need to run payroll.
Thank you, Chief Westbrooks.
Yes.
Chief of Finance says we need a vote tonight. Could we please ask the board to entertain a vote tonight?
Okay.
Adopt the resolution as presented by the administration.
You don't have to be more specific.
Madam President, I move that the board adopt the resolution to pay district employees for workdays missed as a result of Spring Ice Independent School District's closure due to Tropical Storm Imelda.
Second.
It has been moved by Deborah Jensen, seconded by Winfred Adams, that the resolution to pay district employees for workdays missed as a result of Spring Independent School District's closure due to Tropical Storm Imelda. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, trustees. We can run payroll.
Yes.
So if you can join me on page 26, we would like to ask our board to accept the grant funds that we've received this year from Region 4 Education Service Center. For the past few years, we have had an opportunity to participate in a grant award program where Region 4 gives us the opportunity to receive some funding on which we are able to subsidize and pay for services that we would have to pay out of pocket for from Region 4. And so the amount that we've been awarded this year is $38,379.11. And in the same manner as last year, we're asking the board to please approve the granting of this award and to authorize the superintendent or his designee to expend the funds as directed by Region 4. Are there any questions?
Okay.
I would ask that that be placed on the consent agenda on Tuesday. We don't have very much policy tonight. We just have a couple. So on page 30, we have a second reading of TASB Board Policy BBE Local Board Members Authority. And if you recall, this is a policy that our Board Governance Committee took a deeper look at. And so on their approval, we've brought it back for approval by the full board. And if you recall, what is added here on page 32 is in written policy what we already do in practice. We ensure that we place all procedures around any confidential information that is shared with the board regarding any district students, employees, and anyone else, any other information that may be requested that's confidential in nature. Are there any questions?
I do have a question. Since your employee records are confidential, if someone's talked about them in an inappropriate group that should not have access to that, and that person is sued, they did malfeasance, so they're on their own. The district wouldn't pay for their defense. They'd have to pay for their own lawyer.
I'm going to defer to the general counsel to respond.
Well, the way I understood it is that we have indemnity if we are doing our duty according to the policy and are not willfully straying from policy.
Yes, that's accurate. So, I mean, worst case, ill will, malicious intent kind of scenario. Yeah, that would be the employee's responsibility. Of course, we still always check with our insurer to see if it's covered under the insurance policy as well. But there's a lot of gray area in there. Yeah, maybe you're doing your job, maybe somebody else overhears it. We just always like to look at that on a situation-specific basis.
Well, in the past, when people have spoken out of school, so to speak, we could have censure by other board members. But it occurred to me later that perhaps that person could get sued and would be responsible for their own defense. So anyway, that just occurred to me.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen.
Okay.
We have one more policy tonight. It's a first reading on page 33. EIC Local Academic Achievement Class Ranking. And if you join me on page 34, I'd like to draw your attention to the recommendation that the administration is bringing to actually revise this policy. And it specifically addresses our advanced placement courses that are taken by our students. As you are all well familiar, students receive additional weighted credit for taking advanced placement classes. In the past, students have taken the class but not taken the exam that accompanies it and have received the credit. And so what we're asking is for the board to amend policy so that, in fact, if a student takes the class, they then take the corresponding examination to receive the weighted credit.
Is there a cost associated with these exams?
That
Do we pay it or the students?
We pay those costs.
Can you give a little bit more background on this? Have we experienced anything relating to this?
Yes, and I'll let Dr. Hinojosa and Ms. Bradford speak specifically to additional details.
Yes, so historically, we do pay for the AP exam for all students enrolled in the AP course. Just beginning last year, we did, the AP actually changed their timeline, so now we register students between March and November of the upcoming year. So students that are enrolled in that course, we register them like in the fall right now. And so it's about $94 per exam. So we go ahead and pay for every student that's enrolled. They have the opportunity to sit for the exam. Students who choose not to show up that day or they just are opting out of the assessment, it's an additional fee of $40 per student that we'll pay for them not to take the exam. And so we really want students to go ahead and take the exam. It's not based on their score that they receive, but for them to really have some buy-in and for them to also just take ownership of their learning. It also gives us great feedback on how we're doing when they take the exam. We get those scores back So we are encouraging students to not just take the course and receive the weighted credit without also sitting for the exam.
Dr. Hinojosa, talk a little bit also about what that does with some people in terms of getting the extra weight for graduation.
That is, and we've actually been studying this policy for a few years now. While the test taking rate has increased, it's increased minimally. What happens is when you are enrolled in an AP course, the weight is 6 points. If you're taking a regular English class, just an on-level English class, it's 4 points. And so what we discovered is many students, many families will take advantage of that opportunity and enroll in that AP course and receive the weights with no intention of taking the test. And so you're really gaming the system, for a lack of a better term, because ultimately your class rank is going to be boosted. And so as we go through every year towards the end of the year and we're looking at GPA and class rank, the key is those students that are enrolled in those AP courses and ultimately do not take the test. The reason we're moving so, while we've discussed it for almost the past 5 years, this last year it hit us extremely hard because not only as a district do we pay for all of the students that have enrolled in these classes, we pay for it. College Board, as Ms. Bradford has explained, they changed the process. So now not only do we pay the $94 for the exam, but if they fail to take the test, there's a penalty we have to pay above and beyond. So for every exam that is not taken, we're actually paying anywhere from $130 to $145. And so we really want the students to take the benefit of having the course, learning, and ultimately sitting for the exam, because as what was just shared is this is good practice for the students. Taking an AP exam, you may not get the 3, 4, or 5, but it is great practice to prepare you for that college entry courses that you're going to be taking.
Does taking the AP exam have any implications for our CCMR A through F rating?
It will definitely have implications. Every student that's the CCMR, right, the College Career Military Readiness, is measured around the students earning credit, dual credit courses, AP exams. Once they take that AP course and pass the exam, we get that 1 point, or that student gets that 1 point. So the curriculum department has done a really good job in building the curriculum and making sure that the syllabi are created and turned into College Board and approved. So the curriculum is there, the teachers have been getting the training. We believe that we are doing a much better job in preparing the students to take the exam. Many kids get nervous about taking any exam, but it's really a no risk for the student. You've been well prepared, take the exam, get the 3, 4, and 5, and get that college credit. If you fail, you're not going to be penalized. But what we are asking is that you allow us to communicate this to the students, and those students that have no intention of sitting for the exam, basically gaming the system, that we're able to let them know, this is not going to happen. And we should know immediately, the students that are enrolled, have them and have their parents sign an agreement they understand. In the springtime, they don't take that exam, then their weight will go from a 6 to a 4 before the end of year GPA and class rank calculations occur.
Do you anticipate, and thank you, I was going to ask you about the weight. Do you anticipate then a drop-off in students who might enroll in AP courses if they are mandated basically to take the test in order to get the 6 versus the 4, I guess?
We may have some students that, really the students that are doing this are very involved and very engaged, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they actually have the ability to take the exam and do well. It's just, I'm not paying for it. Why do I need to take it? Why do I have to take another test? And And so we just want, parents and families to be well aware of it. And also, I hear it from Ms. Westbrooks all the time, we're paying for these exams and our students are not sitting for the exam. And so other districts, the students pay for this. And so we want the students to really take value in what we are investing in them and see it all the way through. It's that commitment to see it all the way through.
Spring's a good deal, man.
District of choice.
It also goes to
This way
equity.
they become more vested in what they're taking,
Absolutely.
of course, and make them accountable.
And it goes to the equity issue that you were speaking to. We don't want money to be a barrier for any student that takes the AP course and then wants to sit for the exam. We make that happen for our students. Okay, if there are no other questions, then I would also request that this item be placed on the consent agenda on Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Next, I'd like to recognize the Chief of School Leadership and Student Support Services, Dr. Lupita Hinojosa.
Thank you, Ms. Newhouse and members of the board. If you will join me on page 39. Last month, you approved the receipt of our 21st Century Grant for the district. Additionally, we partnered with Harris County Department of Ed and wrote for the grant through them for one of our schools, which is Bammel Middle School. And so this month we bring to you the interlocal agreement between Harris County Department of Education and Spring ISD, specifically for our 21st Century grant at Bammel Middle School. This is a total of $138,976 that will come to Bammel to implement the after-school program.
I will need that left off.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Then if you will join me on page 71. And on page 71, you also see a partnership, an MOU that we have seen for the past 5 years. And this is to renew our partnership with Lone Star College System, specifically at North Harris. And this is the partnership around the ability to offer dual credit courses. And so, as I said, we're continuing. This will be our 6th year in this partnership, and it really outlines the collaboration between Lone Star College North Harris and Spring ISD to allow the students the ability to take dual credit courses. And dual credit courses, as you know, it's the pairing up, what we call the crosswalk, that a student can be enrolled in a high school credit and a college credit and earn both high school credit for that course and that college credit for specifically around the core subjects. And what you will notice in this contract is Lone Star has a much deeper offering in their course catalog, because you'll see that now our students have the opportunity to take dual credit courses in the area of CTE. So we are asking the approval of this MOU, and I'll point out that this MOU for the first time is a 3-year MOU with an option to, of course, come back every year if there's anything that we want to be able to amend. But it is a 3-year MOU for us.
Dr. Hinojosa, now these are taught at Lone Star as well as in Spring ISD schools?
Yes, so we do a
this
combination.
is unbelievable. This is
It is.
amazing.
It
From
is.
Pages 85 to 95.
The
all
courses that are offered.
Yeah.
And you'll see that there's a lot more, a plethora of our CTE courses, and really goes back to the CCMR, giving the ability of our students that may not be going to college, may not be going to the university, but to be able to earn their licenses and certifications as a result of taking these courses. But it is very extensive, and we're very pleased with the work that they have done. So we have students, for example, all of our early college, they're now at Lone Star. So their teachers, with the exception of 2, are all college professors. We do transport students from Winchie and Spring and Decaney over to Lone Star North Harris to take courses. But we also have our teachers that have been approved by the college, and so our teachers need to have a master's degree and 18 hours, college credit hours, in the course that they're going to be teaching. So we have several of our own teachers at each of our high schools that teach the dual credit courses, and of course using the syllabi from the college and under the direction of the department chair at the college.
And just for clarification, are they compensated additionally by Lone Star, or?
No, it's our they're our teachers. So they're, instead of teaching English 4, they're teaching English 1301 or 1302.
Right. Okay.
I can also, I noticed that,
Yes.
I noticed, I see French, what's German, Spanish, any other languages besides those?
No.
I'm glad to see German by a matter of fact.
Sign language is the other one that's in here. Sign language.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll also see, because we are doing a 3-year contract, we also have included in this MOU, in this contract, the ability to continue to use our textbooks for 3 years. So we're really pleased with this contract, where we've been able to not only meet the needs of the college, but most importantly, address the needs of Spring ISD in this MOU.
Talk about a district of choice. Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tell story out there.
That beacon of light is starting to shine bright.
Thank you, Dr. Henderhouse.
Thank you, Ms. Newhouse.
Okay. Chief Westbrook, we'd like to hear back from you again this time. I'm sorry, Mark Miranda. I'm sorry.
We can just approve all of mine and move on.
I skipped right. I was about to skip right over you, Mark.
That's okay. President Newhouse, Dr. Watson, members of the board, we're on page 101. This is an agenda item really to continue, if necessary, the discussion surrounding the Spring ISD, the Spring High School pool. We did start that conversation with the one-time cost conversation, and this is here to continue that discussion if needed.
Well, I think our understanding was y'all were going to present us with some options. Is the option just that we spend $2 million, or we were going to talk about the possibility of it maybe being part of the 9th grade center? So what did y'all come up with?
Oh, okay. The 2 options that we had were considerably more expensive than the option that we presented. And so one option, which was to, as you mentioned, make it a part of the 9th grade center, that area near the 9th grade center, and that option was around the $12 million mark. And this other option was to possibly actually build a Spring ISD natatorium, which would get us closer to the $20 million mark, which is why we settled on the one feasible option where there was actually funding available, and that's where we brought the renovation forward as opposed to the 2 new facilities.
So will the pool be closed while this is happening, I assume?
We need to work with the school, with athletics, with the contractor and the architect to minimize the closure. There will be time when the pool will have to be closed for some of that renovation, but we're going to do our best to work really well with them to be able to minimize that. Any additional? Oh.
Will our students maybe be able to use one of the other high school swimming pools during that interim?
Certainly, that would be an option.
Okay.
And
That way
Willie,
they don't lose.
Willie has been involved in these discussions as well, and so he would help us with
Okay.
scheduling.
I know you met with them.
Yeah, so when they met with the parents, they weren't complaining about the pool. So they want us to leave it alone, let them keep swimming. But we want to make sure that the things that need to be fixed are fixed. And Mark and his team has already been fixing certain things, and they haven't had any closure. And so they're going to continue working with them to make sure that gets done.
Any additional? Would you like to join me on page 102? We've mentioned this as well, actually, briefly earlier. This is the GMP number 2 for Westfield High School's 9th grade center. As I mentioned previously, this is mostly for HVAC installation, electrical, electronic safety and security, elevators. These are things that are long lead items. Right now they're working on the asbestos abatement inside the building, and this will get us that next step. We plan to come back in November with a 3rd GMP that'll be a higher GMP to be able to start really getting a lot of the work done.
Is there asbestos
In a few places, probably, yeah. We always have to
One
check.
time we had them had it at both.
Right. Any questions there? Okay, so my last item is on page 105. If you've read this item, it might sound familiar to you. It was very familiar when it came up to me, again, for approval. Back in May, you guys approved an interlocal agreement with the Harris County Public Health Department concerning the Strategic National Stockpile. You may remember that in May, if you stretch back and remember that. The Strategic National Stockpile includes medications and medical supplies in the event of a medical emergency. In May, we approved what's called an open pod, an agreement between Spring ISD and the Harris County Public Health to create an open pod for distribution of medical supplies or medications, and that would be open to the public. And so if we had a medical emergency, we would open one of our campuses. We've prearranged with the Harris County Public Health Department to be able to do that. We would open one of our campuses to administer these medications to the public. That's what you approved in May. Now what you would be approving is what's called a closed pod. This would be the very same thing for the Strategic National Stockpile, but it would be closed, meaning that it would be only available to Spring ISD employees and their families. And the reason they like to do that is to get us, because we would be critical personnel for the open pod, they would be able to get us our medications in a different location to keep us away from having to go to the open pod. And so it's kind of a win-win for the school district and for the Harris County Public Health Department. And so this would be the approval for the closed pod, so it's kind of closing the loop on that. We did the open pod in May, and this would be the closed pod for Spring ISD. Questions on that?
Do you know any of these vaccines? Are they anthrax?
Okay, so
Ebola.
Yes, yes, and probably yes. They're actually
Yes, and probably
oral
yes.
administered medications, primarily. And yes,
I'd
for
love to
those
see
two
the
that you
list.
mentioned, they didn't have a list to show us when we met with them, but all of the biggies. To use a technical term, it's getting later. Punching. Any additional questions? Thank you. That concludes my 3.
Thank you, Chief Miranda. And now, again, Ms. Brooks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. If you all could turn with us to page 112. And we issued a request for competitive seal proposals for curriculum consulting services. And we had 15 vendors that responded to this request. And we are actually asking the board to qualify and award all 15 of the vendors as being eligible to provide services to the district, our curriculum consulting services to the district. But we are asking to have one specific vendor listed as the sole provider for entrepreneurial leadership, the entrepreneurial leadership curriculum program. So all 15 would be able to help with consulting services, but this one vendor in particular we're requesting as the vendor for the entrepreneurial program.
Which one is that?
That is So Go Collective.
Okay. And just for clarification, what would curriculum consulting services entail?
Ms. Bradford?
Yes, definitely. So they will really work with us to design some curriculum units that we can embed within our core curriculum. This comes directly from some of the student panel work that we did last year, talking to our seniors or our high school students to really hear about what was most interesting in their schools, what they most enjoyed learning about. And they really wanted to feel like they were well prepared for a life after high school. So really looking at our middle school and our high school curriculum, and it's an entrepreneurial curriculum, so it really helps students explore what they're most interested in, has them doing some assignments like building a business plan, public speaking, presenting. A cumulative activity is like a Shark Tank environment where they actually share their ideas and what they've designed and created. So it's connecting to our TEKs such as personal financial literacy, also concepts around collaboration, student engagement, and just really connecting our core standards to a more engaging way of teaching. So students are writing, they're reading, they're participating, but it's around things that they are most interested in. So this consulting firm will work with us to design units that we can embed within our curriculum.
And the other, so that's the SOGO. And then the other ones are just as needed. If you need them, they're available, basically.
Correct. Yes.
Is there a maximum on the expenditures for SOGO?
So we just know that it probably will be more than the $50,000, so that's why we're bringing it. But it definitely will be within that $50,000 to $75,000 range. They also provide professional learning for us, so they actually come on site and will help us as we develop the curriculum with our curriculum team, but also professional learning for teachers. And they actually help us with mentoring, so business partners can come in and work with us as well. So they have a very holistic wraparound support for us as we look at really, we've aligned our curriculum to the TEKs, but now ensuring that it is meeting our student needs and really providing those engaging experiences.
I want us to have what we need for curriculum, but can we get an update? Because at one time you had provided a list of
A programs list? Yes, ma'am.
and there was going to be an assessment on them. Has that been completed?
Yeah, so they did an assessment on those, and we provided that to you all. One of the things that you are going to be getting this month in the governance template, the return on investment.
That's what I'm
And so you'll be getting that this month. It's due this month to you all. It's one of the constraints.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions on that item, then our next item is on page 115, and that's our monthly list of taxpayer refunds. I do not want to rush you, but if there are no questions on that item, then we will keep moving to the last item.
again?
I'm sorry?
PLDAB?
What does it stand for? I do not have that information with me, but I can get it for you, or at least tell you what type of company it is, if that's helpful. Okay. Then our last item is our monthly list of cooperative purchases exceeding $50,000, and that list is on the last page in your binders, page 117.
got revised.
I'm sorry?
Yes, you
We
do.
have to revise it, right?
Yes.
Different.
We haven't,
We got it.
we haven't updated this one.
Okay.
Put it in the back of
Thank
the
you.
binder.
It looked identical to me, but
Yeah, they
there must
did.
be something different. All right. I assume that we check on the software, differentiated literacy, and as well as the Edmentum map and reading program. We are also looking at that for return on investment. Okay, good.
You have 68 potential homeless students. 68.
That we would provide, that we're providing transportation to.
68.
Yes, sir.
And it looks like Winchie's really getting revved up.
They are. They're getting some very much needed updates to that big room that has all of the programs in there, the welding program. Yes, ma'am. Lots of updates there.
Oh, good.
I notice on a number of occasions we're using Sterling Structures, but it seems like they're coming through a cooperative. I mean, are they the only ones in the cooperative?
No, we have used others in the cooperative too. I can get you some.
I
lists.
consistently see them though. I just didn't know if there was something special about them or if they were the only ones in that particular one or what. So
No, there are others in the cooperative that we have used.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrook. That concludes the items that we have on our agenda tonight. However, I know, Winfred, you did ask for Jeremy to get that information that you wanted for us on FN local.
Right.
He has shared that with us, so if you don't mind, we'll save it for Tuesday night
Yeah, I
for
was
discussion.
fine with people having some time
Everybody
to think
look
about it for
at it
themselves. Yeah,
We'll continue it on Tuesday night.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So the Board of Trustees will now recess this open session and convene, and,
Thank you.
and we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second? Second. It's been moved by Justine Durant, second by Jana Gonzalez. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. There's no further business. This meeting is officially adjourned at 9:43 p.m.
That's not too